I was supposed to become the hero. I chose farming. Then the demon queen came to kill me. So I threw the sacred sword into a woodpile, hid behind my tomato patch, and somehow defeated her anyway. That should have ended the prophecy. Instead, it made everything worse. Because the demon queen did not look scared, she looked interested. And when Valeria Thorn smiled at me from the ruins of my squash patch, I realized something terrifying. I had not just survived the final boss, I had caught her attention. Valeria Thorn came to kill the legendary hero while I was sprinting across Havenacre Farm with wet laundry under one arm and a tray of smoked trout under the other. The sky had split purple. My tomato starts were bending sideways. Atlas, the sacred hero sword, chose that exact moment to slam hilt first into my palm. The old rule was simple. Whoever held Atlas was the hero who could end the Thorn Queen. My rule was simpler. If I fought like the hero she expected, my tomatoes, my porch, and probably my spine were gone. So I threw Atlas into the woodpile and shouted, "Bolt, behind the porch!" The sword hit the logs with a clank that sounded offended. Then, the demon queen landed in my squash patch. Valeria Thorn did not walk out of the storm. She made the storm kneel first. Black lightning folded behind her like wings. The mud around her boots dried, cracked, and started smoking. She looked at me, then at the woodpile, then back at me. "Pick it up," she said. I held up the trout tray. "I'm holding fish. That was my first mistake." Valeria lifted one finger. The air over Havenacre Farm went silent. Not quiet, silent. The rain stopped falling halfway down, like even the weather had decided to wait for permission. Valeria's finger came down. A black sun opened above my porch. Bolt stepped out from behind the rain barrel. My mechanical dog was waist-high, dented, and built from parts I had once ordered to scare melon thieves. His left ear plate never sat straight. His tail clicked when he lied about being low on oil. He looked at the black sun, barked once, and opened the copper hatch in his chest. The annihilation spell hit him. Then it came down as warm rain. Behind the fence, shapes crouched in the ditch. Surrender tags, torn blankets. People who had followed her storm because they wanted to see the missing hero die before he dragged the world into another war. I did not know their whole story yet. I only knew they were staring too. Not normal rain either. Polite rain. Farm rain. It fell in neat rows across the tomato starts, washed the ash off my laundry, and steamed gently over the smoked trout without ruining the salt. Valeria stared. The ditch people stared. Even Atlas rattled in the woodpile. That, the sword said, muffled under a split log, was not standard hero conduct. I pointed at the porch. "Bolt, good boy." Bolt wagged his metal tail. Valeria's eyes narrowed. I had seen plenty of angry people in 2 lives. Angry bosses, angry landlords, one angry goose that had owned the East Pond for 3 weeks. Valeria was different. Her anger did not get loud first. It got focused. 15 years, she said. I waited 15 years for the hero to crawl out of whatever hole protected him. I was mostly in the barn. The sword chose you as poor judgment. Atlas snapped upright in the woodpile, hilt shaking. I chose the prophesied vessel. I kicked a log over it. The ditch people made a sound like a whole crowd swallowing at once. That mattered later. Valeria had come to settle a prophecy. They had come to watch the prophecy fail. Instead, they watched the sacred sword get treated like kindling. Valeria smiled. At the time, I thought that smile meant she was amused. Then every fence post on the farm bent toward her. "Fine," she said. "If you refuse the blade, I will burn the farm and see what you protect first." That was when the Havenacre barrier showed itself. For 15 years, it had been invisible. A soft edge around the fields. Monsters avoided it. Tax collectors got lost near it. Door-to-door priests developed sudden interest in other roads. I had not questioned it much. A man who gets one quiet miracle should not poke it with a shovel. But when Valeria's second spell hit, the barrier appeared over the farm like a glass bowl made of old sunlight. For half a breath, it held. Then, it cracked. A line of white fire ran over the sky, down the barn roof, across the fence and under my boots. The tomato starts stood up straight. The chicken coop exploded open. The chickens made a tactical retreat under the wagon. Valeria looked delighted. "Now we are being honest," she said. I was not being honest. I was doing math. 1 demon queen. 1 cracked barrier. 1 dog who had just turned the apocalypse into irrigation. 1 sword yelling under firewood. 1 tray of trout cooling in my hands. So I did what any serious hero would do. I set the trout on the porch before it got dropped. Valeria's smile faded by 1 tiny degree. That tiny degree saved my life, because while she was deciding whether I had insulted her on purpose, Bolt moved. He was not fast like a wolf. He was fast like a thrown tool. 1 second he was by the rain barrel. The next he was between Valeria and the tomato bed, copper paws digging trenches in the mud. Valeria spread her hand. Black spears fell out of the sky. Bolt's back opened. The laundry lines snapped loose from their posts, wrapped around the spears, and spun them into a tight bundle. The bundle landed beside my compost heap. The compost heap glowed. I took one step away from it. A pumpkin vine burst out, grabbed the black spears, and swallowed them like noodles. The largest pumpkin on that vine grew a face. Then, it burped smoke. The ditch people screamed and crawled backward. Valeria did not move. She looked at the pumpkin. She looked at Bolt. She looked at me. You fed my curse to produce. I did not ask it to do that. You expect me to believe that? No, I barely believe that. Her gaze sharpened again, and this time the air around her turned heavy. My teeth hurt. The nails in the porch pulled halfway out and pointed at her like they wanted to surrender. A blue panel flashed in front of my face. The beginner system had not spoken to me in years, mostly because I kept closing it. Route correction available. Hero points unspent. 7,412. Suggested action. Retrieve Atlas. I waved the panel away with my elbow. The panel came back. Suggested action. Stop farming. I waved harder. There were 3 things you need to know about my first life, and none of them deserved a speech while Valeria Thorn was charging another spell. I had worked too many years for other people. I had died tired, and when a glowing system offered me a sword, a prophecy, and a road paved with corpses, I bought seeds instead. Seeds. Fence wire. A smokehouse. Repair manuals. A Guardian chassis on clearance because the seller claimed it was aggressive toward carts. That was Bolt. That was also the full extent of my heroic preparation. Valeria raised both hands. The purple clouds above Havenacre folded into a ring. The cracked barrier groaned. Outside the fence, shapes began pressing through the gap. Horned things, mud things, skinny things with too many elbows. The ditch people saw the monsters and started running. One older man tripped near the road. A mud thing lunged for him. I grabbed Atlas out of the woodpile by instinct and threw it like a stake. The sword flew clean over the monster, spun sideways, and pinned the old man's blanket to a fence post. The old man screamed. Atlas screamed louder. "Stop throwing me!" Bolt handled the monster. He hit it in the ribs, opened his jaw, and fired a short white beam that turned the thing into a pile of damp clay. The older man stopped screaming. He looked at the sword holding his blanket, then at me. "He saved me with the holy blade," he whispered. I had missed by 6 feet. The woman beside him grabbed his arm. "The hero humiliated the sacred sword and still saved you." That was not what happened, but Valeria heard it. Her face changed. Not fear. Not yet. Interest. That was worse. "So this is your method," she said. "You lower the world's guard with nonsense." I pulled Atlas free and jammed it point first into the mud. "My method is asking you to leave. You ask as if I am a guest. You are standing on squash." Valeria looked down. Her boot had crushed 3 young squash plants. She lifted her foot. I wish I could say I made her do that. I did not. I think she was just offended that the plants looked disappointed. Then Bolt barked again, sharper this time. The cracked barrier was opening wider. More monsters pressed near the north fence. The ditch people had scattered, but they were not gone. They were watching from rocks, wagons, and the ditch grass like people witnessing a trial they had already lost. Valeria noticed them too. Her expression went cold. "Your audience came to watch your death," she said. "Will you protect them as well?" "No." The word came out too fast. A few of the watchers flinched. I swallowed. "Bolt will!" Bolt's ears snapped forward. Valeria laughed once. "It was a beautiful sound if you did not care about living." "Then I will kill the dog first." She moved. Not spellcasting this time. She crossed the field faster than a falling roof. Her hand cut through the rain, aimed at Bolt's head. Bolt ducked. The porch steps launched sideways. That was not a metaphor. The steps had been loose since winter. Apparently Bolt had installed something under them without telling me. The whole step box fired like a spring trap, slammed into Valeria's ankle, and exploded into boards. Valeria stumbled 1 inch. The ditch people gasped. 1 inch was enough for Bolt to leap. He clamped his metal jaws around the black aura at Valeria's wrist and pulled. The aura came away like torn cloth. Valeria's eyes widened. She looked at Bolt like he had stopped being a pet. Then she hit him. Bolt flew through the herb rack, the rain barrel, and half the bean trellis. He landed in the carrot bed with smoke pouring from his shoulder. My chest went cold. "Bolt!" His tail clicked once. "Alive!" Valeria turned back to me. "Now," she said, "pick up the sword." Atlas vibrated in the mud beside me, far too eager. I did pick it up. The watchers leaned forward. The beginner system flashed so bright it hurt. Route restored. Target marked. Queen Valeria. Strike now. I looked at Valeria. I looked at Bolt smoking in the carrots. I looked at the cracked barrier and the monsters squeezing through because she had broken the one quiet thing keeping my farm hidden. Then I walked to the porch and hung Atlas on the broken coat hook. The sword made a strangled sound. Valeria stared at the coat hook. I grabbed the emergency handcuffs from the nail beside the door. They were not heroic. They were farm cuffs, built after a raccoon with thumbs opened my pantry 3 nights in a row. I had upgraded them with leftover system parts, because raccoons in this world negotiate like criminals. Valeria noticed the cuffs. Her smile returned. You intend to bind me? I intend to keep you from murdering my dog while I check his shoulder. You think I will allow that? Then Bolt fired from the carrot bed. Not a beam this time. A net. Silver wire burst around Valeria's boots, wrists, and waist. The wires did not hold her. They did not have to. They made her pause. I slapped the handcuffs around one wrist. The cuffs locked. Valeria's aura hit them. The porch window shattered inward. Every jar in my pantry rang at once. The cuffs stayed shut. Valeria looked at them. Then at me. Then at the coat hook, where Atlas was still hanging like a bad umbrella. I had maybe 3 seconds before she stopped being confused, so I used all 3. I grabbed Bolt's smoking collar, yanked him behind me, and shouted, "Porch protocol!" Bolt's tail clicked twice. The farm answered. The windmill spun backward. The fence posts lit up. The laundry line snapped into a web. The smokehouse chimney belched a column of white heat into the storm. Valeria tried to rise. The ground under her feet turned slick with fresh mud. Not magic mud. Farm mud. Humiliating mud. Her boots slid. The demon queen who had conquered kingdoms, broken armies, and dragged a prophecy out by the throat, slipped on my yard and hit one knee. The watchers saw it. The monsters saw it. Atlas definitely saw it. "Oh!" the sword said. Valeria's face went blank. That blankness was the scariest thing I had seen all day. Then the black ring above the farm collapsed. All the magic she had gathered came crashing down. Bolt shoved me backward with his head. The smokehouse chimney split open. The rain barrel rose off the ground. The cracked barrier caught the falling spell, bent inward, and screamed like a saw blade. For one breath, Havenacre Farm was inside a black star. Then Bolt's chest hatch opened again. The black star drained through him, through the fence, through the wet rows of tomatoes, through the pumpkin vine that had already developed bad habits, and into the ground. Every seed in the east field sprouted at once. Every monster inside the fence turned into wet dirt. Every watcher outside the fence dropped flat. Valeria Thorn took one step toward me. Then her eyes rolled back. She collapsed on my porch. The storm vanished. The Havenacre barrier tore open from the hill to the creek with a sound like cloth ripping. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the ditchwoman pointed at my porch and shouted, "The hero defeated the Thorn Queen with a dog." No! The older man clutched Atlas to his chest even though I had not given it to him. He spared her. Another watcher backed away, already running. He threw the holy sword away because he did not need it. That was also not... They ran before I could finish. Rumors move faster than monsters. I learned that on the first day. Bolt limped to the porch and nudged Valeria's hand with his nose. She did not wake. The beginner system floated in front of my face again. Target neutralized. Execute final strike? Atlas hummed from the older man's arms like it was trying to look useful. I closed the system window. Then I took Atlas back, dragged Valeria inside by the shoulders, and locked the second cuff around the iron leg of my kitchen table. I did not do it because I was brave. I did it because killing someone called Final Boss felt like the kind of decision that came with paperwork from heaven. Also, she had broken my barrier. Outside, beyond the ripped edge of Havenacre, monsters began circling the fence instead of fleeing it. The watchers were already gone, carrying the wrong version of everything they had seen. Inside, Valeria Thorn lay on my kitchen floor, soaked, handcuffed, and breathing smoke through her teeth. Atlas hung on the wall by the door. Bolt sat between her and the pantry, one shoulder sparking. Then Valeria opened her eyes. The handcuffs were not a ritual. Valeria Thorn thought they were. She woke on my kitchen floor with one wrist cuffed to the iron table leg, one boot still muddy from slipping in my yard, and the look of a woman deciding whether humiliation counted as a war crime. I was across the room with a skillet in one hand and a pantry knife in the other. Not for her, for breakfast. That distinction did not calm her. "You chained me beside food," Valeria said. "I chained you away from the food." Her eyes moved to the pantry. Bolt moved with them. His shoulder was patched with a strip of copper, 2 nails, and the last clean towel I owned. He was still smoking. He was also standing between the Demon Queen and my dried apples like a retired sheriff with unfinished business. Valeria looked down at the cuff. Then she smiled. The table leg bent. Every spoon in the kitchen jumped. The cuff did not open. Valeria stopped smiling. That was the second best thing the cuffs had ever done. The first was catching the raccoon. Atlas rattled on the wall by the door. "Those restraints contain unauthorized hero-grade residue." I pointed the skillet at the sword. "You are on thin ice." Valeria's gaze snapped to Atlas, then back to me. You bind sacred tools, starve divine blades, and command a beast that eats annihilation, she said. Yet you pretend to be afraid. I am not pretending. Liar! Ask my hands! They were shaking. Unfortunately, that made Valeria look more suspicious, not less. Outside the kitchen window, the broken Havenacre barrier flickered like torn glass. The field beyond it had changed overnight. Monsters gathered at the edge of the farm and sniffed the open air. The ditch people were gone, but their footprints stayed in the mud, all pointed away from my house. The rumor had already left before breakfast. That was bad. The barrier being open was worse. Killing Valeria might have ended one problem and started every prophecy problem the system had ever wanted. Letting her walk out might leave the farm open to everything that had been waiting 15 years to get in. So I needed a third option. Unfortunately, my best third option was soup. Valeria pulled the table leg another inch across the floor. Release me! No killing in the kitchen. Her eyes sharpened. That was not a no. It was a rule. She leaned toward me. The cuff chain went tight. I make rules. Not in my kitchen. That line should have gotten me killed. Instead, Valeria looked at the pantry again. The pantry saved me twice that morning. A blue beginner system panel blinked beside the stove while I diced peppers. Enemy captive. Route restored. Suggested action. Interrogate. I closed it with my elbow. The panel popped up again. Suggested action. Execute. I closed it with the pepper bowl. Valeria watched the floating panel vanish. You have a system, she said. Had one. It still answers. So does Atlas. I ignore both. Atlas rattled harder. I dumped peppers into the skillet. The smell hit Valeria first. Her chin lifted. Barely. Like appetite was an enemy scout and she had caught it trespassing. What is that? She asked. Stew. It burns. That is how peppers introduce themselves. I do not eat surrender offerings. Good. This is breakfast. She looked offended enough to survive another minute. So I unlocked the cuff. Bolt growled. Valeria did not move. That was the problem with people like her. When they did not move, it never meant safety. It meant the next action mattered more. I set the key on the table and stepped back. You can leave, I said, but if you break the rest of my barrier, I am sending Bolt after your ankles again. Bolt's tail clicked. Valeria looked at him. Bolt looked at her. The kitchen table creaked between them like furniture waiting for history to make up its mind. Then a monster hit the fence outside. Not a small one. The impact shook flour off the shelf. I turned. Through the window, a horned thing pushed its head through the torn barrier. Its mouth opened wide enough to swallow a sheep. Valeria raised one hand, bored. I said, no. She paused. The monster bit the fence rail. Move, she said. No vaporizing beside the herb bed. It is eating your fence. I built that fence crooked. It can take criticism. She stared at me like I had invented a new form of disrespect. Bolt limped to the door, opened his jaw, and fired a short white pulse. The monster became a mound of wet clay. Two more monsters stepped back from the fence. Then they did something I did not expect. They looked at Valeria through the window and lowered their heads. Valeria noticed. I noticed her noticing. That mattered. Her presence did not just attract danger, it organized it. I put a bowl of pepper stew on the table. Eat, I said. Valeria slowly turned from the window. You command me? I am feeding you. There is a difference? At my house, yes. Her gaze dropped to the bowl. The stew was not pretty. Red broth, beans, smoked trout flakes, cracked peppers, onion, a spoon standing up in the middle because I had made it too thick. A proper hero would have negotiated an oath. I added cornbread. Valeria sat. Not because I told her to. She made that clear by taking the chair like she had conquered it. Then she picked up the spoon. The first bite changed the room. Her shoulders locked. The windows fogged. The black mark under her left eye flared purple, then gold, then the exact red of my pepper rose. Bolt lowered his head. Atlas whispered from the wall, that is not normal stew. Valeria swallowed. A circle of black fire opened under the chair. The chair did not burn. Instead, every scratch in the kitchen floor filled with new grain. The cracked table legs straightened. The broken latch on the pantry snapped itself shut. Valeria's pupils narrowed to slits. You poisoned me. I looked at the bowl. You took one bite. My body is changing. That happens around breakfast. She gripped the spoon hard enough to bend it around her fingers. Sweat appeared on her forehead. That was impossible in 3 different ways. Valeria had walked through annihilation magic like weather. Pepper stew made her sweat. She stood so fast the chair flew backward. Bolts shifted. I grabbed the pitcher of milk. Valeria pointed the spoon at my throat. Antidote. I held up the pitcher. She looked at it, then at the stew, then back at me. It looked like pride and appetite were trying to kill each other across her face. I was not inside her head. I only saw the spoon tremble. She snatched the pitcher, drank, and froze again. The milk glowed faintly as it touched her lips. The black fire under her chair turned soft blue. Outside, the monsters at the fence knelt, not attacked, not fled, knelt. Valeria lowered the pitcher. I had seen monarchs in old workplace videos accept awards with less dignity than she used to swallow milk from my dented pitcher. Then she sat back down and took another bite. I did not speak. Sometimes a man survives by letting breakfast do the talking. Valeria ate half the bowl before glaring at me. This is a coercive potion. It is stew. It makes my magic answer the soil. That sounds inconvenient. It tastes too good. That is usually the onions. Her eyes flashed. Then she ate the cornbread. The pantry door popped open by itself. Every jar of preserves rolled to the front of the shelf like nervous citizens presenting tribute. Valeria stared at them. I stared at them. Bolt put one paw over the pantry threshold. No, I told the jars. The jars stopped. Valeria slowly looked at me. You command the pantry, only on good days. She leaned back in the chair she had conquered and studied the window. Outside, the monsters were still kneeling. One skinny thing with too many elbows turned around and hissed at another monster trying to creep toward the fence. The second monster backed away. The farm had a new fence. Unfortunately, it was sitting at my kitchen table, eating my stew and accusing me of crimes. Valeria saw it too. Her expression sharpened in a way I did not like. If I remain, she said, they will not cross. If you leave, they might. If I kill you, they will worship the ashes. Let us not test that. If I spare you, the prophecy remains insulting. The prophecy has been insulting me for years. Atlas snapped against the wall hook. I can hear you. Good, I said. Valeria tapped the bent spoon against the bowl. Every tap made the monsters outside lower their heads another inch. Then she smiled, smaller this time. I will stay. No, she blinked. That was the first time I surprised her without machinery. I pointed at the bowl. You can stay under conditions. I do not accept conditions. You accepted cornbread. Bolt made a sound that was almost a cough. Valeria's gaze cut to him. The mechanical dog looked away too late. I counted on my fingers because rules sound less suicidal when they come with fingers. 1. No killing guests. 2. No burning crops. 3. Pantry access requires asking. 4. If you break something, you help fix it. 5. No calling breakfast poison unless you finish the bowl. Valeria watched my hand like each finger was an enemy commander. Then she lifted the bowl and drank the rest of the stew. A pulse of warm pressure spread from the kitchen, through the porch, across the fields, and out to the torn line of the Havenacre barrier. The broken edge stopped flickering. The monsters outside turned outward, guarding. The ditch road went quiet. Valeria set the empty bowl down. I will remain under research conditions. Research? She pointed the bent spoon at the pantry. Your food, your beast, your insulting sword, your impossible farm. My couch is not a throne. It is now part of the research. No. She stood, walked into my front room, and sat on the couch. The couch made a soft, traitorous creak. Then every monster outside the fence turned its back to the house and faced the road. I opened the front door because I am apparently stupid when evidence is loud. The biggest monster stood at the gate with my broken fence rail still between its teeth. It saw me, lowered its head, and spat the rail neatly into the mud. A smaller monster tried to crawl under the fence toward the chicken coop. Valeria did not rise from the couch. She only turned her spoon over in one hand. The smaller monster flattened itself to the ground and backed away from my chickens. The chickens noticed. That was dangerous. The boldest hen walked straight to the gate, pecked the mud thing on its nose, and strutted back like she had just conquered a minor kingdom. The mud thing did not retaliate. Bolt looked at me. I looked at Valeria. Valeria looked pleased with herself, which meant I needed to ruin it before it became policy. No eating people who stay off the porch, I said. She lifted one eyebrow. You give orders to my aura now? I am giving rules to my yard. Your yard is currently obeying me. My yard has bad taste under pressure. The spoon bent in her hand. Outside, one of the anti-hero refugees had crept back to grab a dropped blanket from the ditch. The biggest monster turned toward her. The woman froze, hands raised, already crying. Valeria watched without moving. I stepped onto the porch. Leave her alone, I told the monster. It did not listen to me. That was fair. I would not have listened to me either. So I turned back to the couch. Valeria. She held my stare for a long second, like helping a terrified civilian was beneath every title she had ever worn. Then she flicked the spoon once. The monster dropped its head and backed off. The refugee grabbed the blanket and ran so hard she left one shoe in the mud. The monsters stayed facing outward. The fence was not fixed, but the farm had a line again. It was a rude line, a dangerous line, and it depended on a woman who still wanted to kill me on principle. But it was a line. I went back inside and took the spoon from Valeria before she turned it into shrapnel. She let me. That tiny surrender bothered her more than the handcuffs had. so she compensated by claiming the couch blanket, the left side of the pantry, and one blue mug for research continuity. I allowed the mug. I refused the pantry shelf. We fought over dried apples for 12 seconds. She won custody of 3 slices. Atlas chose that moment to drop from the wall hook. The sword hit the floor, bounced once, and slid under the side table like it had planned a dramatic entrance and missed. "Hero!" Atlas said, voice muffled by dust. "I object to enemy quartering rights." Valeria leaned over the arm of the couch and looked down at it. The sword went quiet. That was the loudest quiet in the room. Valeria reached for the hilt with 2 fingers. Atlas sparked blue and shot backward into the umbrella bucket by the door. The bucket tipped. 3 umbrellas fell on the sacred blade. Valeria stared at the heap. Then she looked at me with fresh suspicion. "Even your prophecy weapon fears your house rules. It hates damp places. It fled me. It fled under umbrellas. You punish sacred weapons with domestic shame. I store things where they fit." She sat back on the couch, and I watched her face change. She had not lost to me in any way she would admit. As far as I could tell, that meant she could not leave yet. The farm had insulted her, fed her, bound her, protected itself from her, and hidden rules inside breakfast. For Valeria Thorn, that was not defeat. That was research bait. I did not enjoy the win, but it was a win. The Demon Queen had not surrendered. She had not apologized. She had not become safe. But she was staying, and the farm was no longer bleeding open. The pantry was disputed territory. The couch had defected. The sacred sword was sulking on a wall hook. And for about 6 peaceful seconds, I believed breakfast had solved the day. Then Bolt's ears rose. He limped to the door, shoved it open with his head, and barked toward the north fence. The guard monsters moved aside. Something came through the broken line of the old barrier. Not a monster. Bolt returned, dragging 2 bodies across the grass. A bloodied man was slumped over his back, one arm locked around a young woman who looked even worse. Her sleeve was torn. Her hair was matted with mud. Black metal teeth were stamped into the hunters. Bolt dragged behind them. One hunter was still breathing. He saw Valeria sitting on my couch and tried to crawl backward with both legs broken. The bloodied man lifted his head just enough to see me. "Please," he whispered, "do not give us to the Black Gear Guild." Bolt parked the strangers beside the carrots like he had brought home damaged farm equipment. The bloodied man tried to bow from the mud. The young woman tried to stand, failed, and still put herself between him and Valeria. That told me 2 things fast. They were terrified. And they were not terrified of me yet. The man pressed one hand to his ribs. "Tobin Grell," he said. "This is my daughter, Lila Grell." Lila looked at Valeria on my couch, then at Atlas on the wall, then at Bolt's smoking shoulder. Her voice came out hoarse. "Are we dead?" "Not in the carrots," I said. Valeria stood. The room temperature dropped. The surviving hunter outside whimpered and tried to crawl under Bolt's paw. That was not promising. The rule was ugly. If I threw Tobin and Lila out, the hunters would take them. If I kept them and they talked, Havenacre Farm became a target with a broken barrier, a demon queen on the couch, and a sword that could not stop complaining. So I chose the option with the least immediate screaming. I pointed at the kitchen. "Inside, tea first, threats after." Valeria turned her head slowly. "You invite bait into your house? I invite bleeding people off my carrots." They were followed. "I noticed the bodies." The surviving hunter laughed once through broken teeth. Bolt stepped on his cloak. The laugh ended. I got Tobin into a chair and Lila onto the bench. Valeria stayed by the doorway, arms folded, looking like she wanted to solve this with a crater. Bolt blocked the outer door. Atlas rattled on the wall hard enough to chip plaster. The beginner system flashed beside the kettle. Unknown bloodline detected. Suggested action. Report. I closed it with the tea tin. The tea tin was old, dented, and full of dried herbs. I grew because buying medicine felt too much like trusting strangers. I poured boiling water over the leaves and set the first mug in front of Tobin. He stared at it like it was a royal pardon. "It is tea," I said. "That is what you said about the stew," Valeria muttered. Tobin drank anyway. The cut across his forehead sealed before he lowered the mug. Lila gasped. Tobin gripped the table. The wood under his hands sprouted tiny green leaves. His back straightened. His gray beard darkened at the roots. The broken rib under his shirt clicked into place loud enough for everyone to hear. He looked at the mug. Then he looked at me. Then he slid off the chair and dropped to one knee. "Do not do that," I said. "He did it harder." Valeria's eyes narrowed at him. "That is a correct reaction." "No, it is not." Lila grabbed her father's shoulder. "Dad?" Her hand brushed the second mug. The tea jumped into her palm. "Not spilled. Jumped." Lila froze. The bruises on her wrist vanished. A faint green light crawled under her skin like vines under glass. Her ears, which had been hidden under mud-caked hair, sharpened into clear half-elf points. Outside, the surviving hunter saw the glow and started crying. Please, he said. Please, no. They will know. Valeria crossed the room so fast the candle flames leaned away from her. She opened the door and looked down at the hunter. Who will know? The hunter pressed his face into the mud. Black gear, Tobin said behind me. His voice had changed. Stronger, angrier. I looked back. Tobin had stood, but not like a healed man celebrating. He stood like someone had just remembered he was allowed to hate. They were not hunting us for ransom, he said. They wanted Lila's blood. They said old blood could help rebuild a queen. The room went still. Not empty still, loaded still. Because the queen they wanted to rebuild was sitting 3 steps from my pantry with pepper stew still on her breath. Valeria did not look surprised. She looked insulted. That was somehow worse. Rebuild, she said. The hunter began to shake so hard Bolt's paw bounced on the cloak. I raised one hand. No killing in the yard. Valeria did not take her eyes off the hunter. Your rules are becoming repetitive. That means they are easy to remember. The hunter's sleeve burned suddenly. A black mark appeared under the cloth, a circle of metal teeth biting its own tail. The same stamp I had seen on the hunters. Bolt dragged through the fence. Black gear. The mark pulsed once. Then every dead hunter at the fence twitched. Lila grabbed the bench. Tobin reached for a weapon he did not have. I had no weapon either, unless you counted a kettle, a sulking sword, a jealous dog, and a demon queen pretending not to be offended by counterfeiting. So I did what I did when people were panicking in my kitchen. I opened the drawer with the cards. They were not supposed to be weapons. I had painted them in the winters when snow pinned the house shut and the system kept offering me violent route updates. The pictures were simple: shield, beast, clown, dog, and archer, sunrise. A whole deck of little pictures because I missed board games and normal weather. Tobin saw the deck and went pale. Valeria saw the deck and smiled like she had found the cruelty she expected from me all along. Lila wiped blood from her lip. What is that? Game, I said. Valeria said, a trial. Tobin said, a holy weapon. Atlas shouted from the wall. Finally, someone respects household armaments. I put the deck on the table. Draw 1 card, I told Tobin. He looked at Lila. I saw the prediction form in his face. If he drew wrong, he thought he would die. If he refused, he thought I would throw them out. Wrong on both, but fear makes bad math. Tobin drew 1 card. It showed a shield. The front window shattered inward as a black bolt from outside punched through the glass. The shield card flashed. A translucent barn door appeared between Tobin and the bolt. The bolt hit the door, flattened, and slid down like burned paint. Tobin stared at the card in his hand. Lila stared at me. Valeria stared at Tobin like he had been given something too expensive for his face. That was not in the rules, I said. Valeria's mouth curved. It was exactly in the rules. You just did not know them. Another hunter rose outside, pulled upright by the black gear mark burning under his skin. His head tilted too far to one side. Black steam leaked between his teeth. Lila snatched a card before I could stop her. It showed a beast. The card glowed green. A wooden boar the size of my stove burst out of the kitchen floor, smashed through the door, and hit the rising hunter in the chest. The hunter flew backward across the yard and disappeared into the bean trellis. The boar kept running. Straight toward the road. Straight toward 3 anti-hero refugees who had crept back to watch from behind my fence. I vaulted the bench, not gracefully. I hit the floor, grabbed Lila's wrist, and slapped my hand over the beast card. Stop, I said. The wooden boar froze with its tusks 1 foot from a terrified refugee's blanket. The woman behind the fence dropped to her knees. Lila went white. Tobin grabbed her other hand. The boar turned into a pile of harmless wood chips. I took the card from Lila and set it on the table face down. New rule, I said, breathing hard. No farm gifts near civilians without asking me first. Lila nodded so fast her hair shook loose around her pointed ears. Valeria looked at the wood chips, then at me. You give rules to gifts. I give rules to people holding gifts. Her eyes flicked to Atlas. The sword went quiet. That fresh rule saved more lives later than I knew. At the time, it only saved 3 refugees from being turned into a footnote by a painted boar. The 3rd card flipped by itself. It showed a clown. Nobody touched it. That made it worse. The little painted clown popped out of the card, landed on the table, bowed to Valeria, and threw a handful of glitter into the air. The glitter became chains. The chains snapped through the broken window and wrapped around 2 crawling hunters by their ankles. Then the clown turned, slapped its own painted backside at them, and blew a raspberry. One hunter screamed, "It marks the gear!" The clown hit him in the face with a cream pie made of sunlight. I looked at the card. I painted that as a joke. Valeria gave me a sideways look. Your jokes have poor boundaries. The clown card bounced back onto the table and bowed again. Then Tobin's shield card began to dim. A thin red line crawled from his thumb into the card. Lila saw it and reached for him. Valeria caught her wrist before she touched the card. "Do not interrupt a binding," Valeria said. Lila glared at her. "He is my father, and if you panic you may kill him." Lila's anger hit the brakes. She wanted to fight Valeria. Instead, she held still. I touched Tobin's shoulder. "Tobin, put the card down." He did. The red lines snapped. The shield card glowed white and settled. Valeria watched him with new interest. "He obeyed before greed finished waking up," she said. Tobin swallowed. "What would have happened if I kept holding it?" The card answered by growing heavier until the table leg cracked. Tobin stepped back. "Understood," he said. "That was when I decided he could leave with the deck. Not because he was strong. Strong people had already made my morning worse. Tobin was scared, desperate, and still capable of putting power down when told. That counted for more." Valeria saw my hand move toward the deck before Tobin understood why. "You cannot be serious," she said. "I usually am when I am making a mistake. You barely understand those cards. I understand they saved him. They nearly ate him. So I am giving them to the man who listened when I said stop." Valeria stepped close enough that the candle behind me went blue. "You denied me free pantry access, but you hand strangers a weapon that makes clowns assault corpses. That is not jealousy, is it?" The room froze. Then I realized what I had said. Valeria smiled slowly. "Careful, farmer." I shut my mouth and pushed the deck toward Tobin. Tobin did not take it. He looked at the cards, then at Lila, then at the hunters outside beginning to rise again under the black marks. "If I take this," he said, "your farm becomes our enemy's destination. It already is. If I fail, they take your gift. Then do not fail near civilians." That got a laugh out of him, a small one. Painful, human. Then he took the true deck. The kitchen lights dimmed. Every card flashed once, like each picture had opened an eye. Tobin staggered. Lila caught him. Valeria looked genuinely annoyed. Atlas muttered, "I was not given a ceremony." "You were thrown into a woodpile," I said. "You keep mentioning that." A hunter twitched beside the fence. Lila's hand moved toward the deck, then stopped halfway. She looked at me first. That small pause mattered. I nodded. She drew a dog card. A wooden farm dog hopped out of the card, saluted Bolt with one stiff paw, and barked at the fence. It sounded nothing like Bolt, more like a chair scraping across a floor. Bolt looked personally insulted. The card dog did not care. It herded the returning refugees back from the fence before the hunter could grab one of them. Then it sat, wagged a square tail, and turned back into a card. Lila exhaled like she had been holding her breath since the boar. The rule had already paid for itself. She asked before unleashing the next miracle. Outside, the hunters attacked. This time Tobin moved first. He stepped onto the porch with Lila behind him and drew the shield card before the first black bolt landed. The barn door shield snapped up across the yard. A hunter tried to climb over it. Tobin drew the beast card. The wooden boar hit the hunter so hard, the black gear mark tore off his sleeve and skittered across the ground like a living beetle. Bolt pinned the beetle under one paw. Valeria crushed it with her heel before it crawled toward the porch. "No speech, no lecture, just heel, crack, smoke." That was the only black gear rule I needed that day. Power now, soul later, and the bill came crawling. 2 more hunters rushed from the trees. Tobin drew the clown card. The painted clown appeared on his shoulder, saluted Lila, and hurled a glowing pie into the first hunter's face. The pie exploded into chains that yanked the hunter upside down from the fence rail. The second hunter slipped around the shield and raised a hooked blade. Lila drew without asking. Then she looked at me. I nodded once. She played the glow card. A warm light burst from the card and wrapped around Tobin's arms. The cuts on his hands sealed. His stance changed. Not trained. Anchored. Tobin drew the drain card and slapped it against the ground. The black marks on the remaining hunters hissed. Smoke poured out of them, dragged by the card into a dark bead no bigger than a pea. The hunters collapsed alive. The bead cracked. The clown card punted it into the compost. The compost burped. I decided not to ask. The refugees behind the fence had seen everything. One of them pointed at Tobin. "Cardmaster." Tobin turned like the words had hit him. "No," he said. Lila grabbed his sleeve. "Dad!" The watchers repeated it anyway. "Cardmaster." That was how Tobin Grell became the first cardmaster. Not in a guild hall, not under a banner, not after a ceremony, but on my muddy porch while a clown card bullied corrupted hunters and my compost developed opinions. Tobin bowed to me again. This time I let him do half of it before pulling him up. "Go before more come," I said. He gripped the true deck to his chest. "We owe you. You owe me card safety." Lila nodded. "No farm gifts near civilians without asking." "Good." Valeria stepped beside me as Tobin and Lila moved toward the road. The monsters outside the fence did not attack them. They lowered their heads to Valeria's aura and let the Grells pass. That should have felt like a win. It did feel like a win. Then the sky split open above the north road. A black circle of metal teeth burned across the clouds. Every hunter corpse in the yard smoked at once. The refugees screamed and scattered. Tobin clutched the deck. Lila looked back at me like she had just realized the gift in her father's hands was also a signal flare. Valeria's face went still. Not angry, not jealous, not amused, still. I had seen that look once already, right before the farm nearly became a crater. The black gear symbol pulsed again, bright enough to turn the wet fields silver. I thought the deck was leaving my house as a harmless thank you gift. I did not know the first person who tried to steal it would wake one of Valeria's oldest nightmares. The black gear symbol did not fade when Tobin and Lila left my farm. It followed them. That was the part that made Valeria stop pretending she did not care. The black circle of metal teeth burned over the north road, pulsing every few breaths like the sky had learned how to chew. Tobin held the true deck to his chest. Lila kept looking back at my porch like she wanted permission to run home to a place she had known for one afternoon. The rule was simple now. Gifts that left Havenacre did not stay quiet. The uglier rule was worse. If I did nothing, my first real gift would drag trouble into the nearest city before Tobin even knew how to shuffle it safely. So I packed a basket of tomatoes, apples, bread, and 3 jars of pepper jam. Valeria watched from the couch with her stolen blue mug. You are not chasing a sky wound with vegetables. I am chasing 2 people carrying my vegetables' bad cousin. The deck is not a cousin. It has the same problem. It acts before I understand it. Atlas rattled from the umbrella bucket. I also act before you understand me. You mostly complain before I understand you. Valeria stood. The monsters at the fence lowered their heads before she reached the door. No public craters, I told her. She smiled. You are starting with insults early. I'm starting with rules. Your rules get more suicidal by the hour. She came anyway. Bolt stayed behind to guard Havenacre because the torn barrier still leaked. He did not like that order. His tail clicked 3 times, which meant he was either offended or preparing to disobey in a way I would discover later. I pretended not to hear it. That was usually how Bolt won. The North Road had already turned into a moving rumor. The same refugees who had watched Valeria fall on my porch were walking ahead of us, behind us, and beside us, all telling a different version of my life. In one version, I had made the Demon Queen meal. In another, Bolt was the real hero and I was his stable boy. My least favorite version involved Atlas choosing me because I had pure hands. Atlas had insisted on coming after hearing that. I had wrapped the sword in burlap and tied it to the underside of the tomato basket. You are smuggling prophecy under produce, Atlas said. I am protecting produce from prophecy. A refugee woman heard the sword and crossed herself with both hands. Valeria looked pleased for exactly half a second until the woman whispered, "The hero even silences holy weapons." Then Valeria looked at me like the rumor had stolen her insult. Half a mile from Stonebridge City, the black gear symbol pulsed overhead. A strip of ash fell onto the road and burned into a tusk-shaped protection tag nailed to a wagon. The tag had the same bite pattern as the skymark, smaller and cheaper. A wagon driver ripped it off and threw it into the ditch. The tag crawled back toward his wheel. Lila reached for her deck. I said, "Ask." She stopped, breathed once and asked, "Shield only." "Shield only." The shield card flashed. A small barn door shield dropped over the tag and pinned it until Valeria stepped on it. The tag cracked into smoke. The wagon driver bowed to Lila, then to Tobin, then accidentally to my basket. That was how I learned Stonebridge City's problem before seeing its walls. The Tusk crew had been selling protection marks that acted too much like black gear and not enough like protection. Stonebridge City looked peaceful from the hill. That was the first lie. Valeria's old statue stood over the main square, 10 times taller than any person, black stone polished smooth by rain. Beneath it, shops were open, but quiet. Curtains were drawn. People moved with that careful walk city folks use when they know someone is watching and nobody admits who. Then we reached the square and found the Tusk crew charging orphans protection money under Valeria's statue. A thick man in a Tusk-stamped vest had one boot on a donation crate. A ledger man held a list of names. 2 knife men blocked the shelter door. Children watched from behind a cracked window. In front of them stood a young woman with a torn sleeve, a cloth doll tucked under one arm, and a spine that looked too stubborn for her tired face. "Nell Quill," Tobin whispered from beside me. "She runs the shelter." Nell had bruises on one cheek. She still put herself between the crew and the door. The Tusk crew boss tapped the ledger with a ringed finger. "Debt doubled. Rumor says you hid black gear bait last night." Nell's voice was steady enough to make the bruises look angrier. "I hid children. That is what bait says when it wants sympathy." Valeria took one step forward. I caught her sleeve, her eyes cut to my hand. No public craters, I said again, softer. The statue's shadow covered her hood. If Stonebridge City recognized the Thorn Queen standing under her own monument, the city would not cheer. It would either kneel, run, or start a war in the square before lunch. Valeria leaned close enough that my ear went cold. He is using my statue as a debt marker, I noticed. And you want me to stay quiet. I want you to stay small for 5 minutes. That line almost killed me. Her smile thinned. Small, temporarily. The Tusk Crew boss noticed us then. His eyes went to Tobin first. The deck case at Tobin's belt was wrapped in plain cloth, but rumor had already dressed it in gold. Then the boss looked at Lila's half-elf ears. Then Nell's doll. Then my basket. Last, he looked at Valeria's hood. Greed has a sound if you listen closely. I did not know his plan yet. I only saw the little pause people make when they start pricing other people's belongings. The boss pointed at my basket. Market tribute. I looked around. For tomatoes? For unregistered produce entering a protected square. Protected by you? He smiled and tapped the tusk mark on his vest. Protected from people who forget who runs the street. Nell looked at me quickly. Do not fight them here. That should have been her line to Valeria. Instead, she said it to me. I did not know whether to feel respected or insulted. The ledger man snatched one tomato from the top of my basket. It was not even my best tomato. It had a scar near the stem and a crooked shape because the east row had grown too fast after Valeria's Black Star incident. The ledger man held it up to the crowd. Royal tribute. Valeria's hood dipped. Royal, she said. I stepped on her boot before she could finish the thought. The ledger man tossed the tomato toward a knife man. He missed. The tomato rolled across the stones and stopped beside a small boy sitting against the shelter wall. The boy's face was gray. Fever sweat darkened his hair. A black rash crawled up his neck in little tooth-shaped marks. Nell moved first. The knife man moved faster. Leave it, he said. The boy grabbed the tomato anyway and bit into it like starving kids bite when dignity is already left. The square went quiet. The rash under his jaw peeled back, not slowly. It fled. Color rushed into the boy's cheeks. He coughed once, spat black smoke onto the stone, and sat up straight. The black smoke tried to crawl away. Valeria stepped on it without looking. The boy stared at the tomato core in his hands. Nell covered her mouth. The ledger man went pale. The crowd moved. Not toward the Tusk Crew, toward my basket. That was when the Tusk Crew realized they had not confiscated vegetables. They had stolen treasure in public and accidentally handed it to a sick child. The boss's smile tightened. That basket is now evidence of illegal alchemy. No, I said, it is lunch. A woman in the crowd held up 2 gold coins with both hands shaking. For 1 tomato, another man shouted. I will pay for the stem. Knife man made the faster business decision. He grabbed one of my pepper jam jars, popped the lid with his thumb, and laughed into it. This city pays gold for sauce now? The jar breathed on him. Red steam shot up his nose. He dropped the jar, clutched his face, and staggered backward into the donation basin under Valeria's statue. The rash under his eye burned away. So did one eyebrow. The crowd saw a thug get cured and humiliated by breakfast spread. That was a better sermon than anything I could have said. The knife man crawled out of the basin, still coughing pepper smoke. Boss, he wheezed, that jar is worth more than my room. Your room has fleas, another crewman muttered. The crowd laughed. The Tusk Crew did not like being laughed at. Men who build authority on fear hate the exact second fear turns into pricing. The knife men looked at each other. The ledger man whispered, Boss! The boss hit him across the mouth with the ledger. That was his mistake. The crowd saw it. Nell saw it. The children in the window saw it. Even the statue seemed to lean harder over the square. The boss pointed at me. Gauge him. Knife man dragged a brass magic gauge from beside the shelter steps. Stonebridge City used those things for dungeon hiring, tax cheating, and humiliating poor people who claimed they could cast. A person put a hand on the plate, the needle climbed, and everyone pretended the number meant worth. The boss slapped his own palm down first. The needle jumped to a red tusk mark near the middle. His crew cheered like he had killed a dragon instead of touched furniture. Then he pointed at me. Your turn, farmer. Tobin shifted. Ethan, you do not have to. No! Put my hand on the plate. The needle did not twitch. The gauge clicked once. A little tin bell rang. The word lit up above my hand in bright, cruel letters. The square laughed. Not everyone. Enough. A crewman stepped behind me with a hot iron brand shaped like a tusk. 0 labor tag, he said. City custom. Nell moved before Tobin could. She slapped her torn debt page against the crewman's wrist, and the paper flared with the same red mark that had been choking her shelter. The crewman yelped and dropped the brand. The debt page smoked in Nell's hand. The words on it crawled like little black teeth, trying to rewrite themselves back into numbers. I pulled 1 tomato leaf from the basket, pressed it onto the page and said, No. The leaf turned silver. The teeth on the paper stopped moving. Nell stared at the cleared line where her shelter's name had been. The crowd saw that too. The Tusk crew had not just been collecting debt, they had been feeding it. The boss saw the crowd's faces tilt against him and decided to get louder. That is usually how a fake authority admits it is bleeding. The Tusk crew boss spread his arms. A zero-magic farmer, a runaway card gambler, a cursed shelter girl, and a hooded woman too scared to show her face. Valeria touched the gauge. I felt the air bend around her, then it stopped. Not because the gauge beat her, because she made herself small. The needle crawled up, trembled, and stopped at the exact same red tusk mark as the boss. His crew cheered louder. One of the knifemen saluted her like she had just joined the Tusk crew. The salute was so ugly that Tobin's hand twitched toward the deck. Lila caught his sleeve. Nell lowered her eyes before the boss saw her smile. Valeria looked at the needle, then at me. I could not see her expression under the hood, but the square felt colder. I matched him, she said. You did. Dislike this more than the handcuffs. That is fair. The boss laughed in her face. See? Not so mysterious now. Valeria's fingers curled. The gauge cracked down the middle. Only a little. I put my hand over hers before the square became a memory. 5 minutes, I whispered. She held still. Nobody in Stonebridge City understood the flex. Valeria Thorn could have erased the Tusk crew, the gauge, and half the square. Instead, she let a street thug think he had measured her. The boss turned back to me. Here is the offer, he said. Gold Vault Labyrinth opens tonight. My crew has entry rights. You carry your miracle basket. The card man brings the deck. Shelter girl brings her doll. Hood stays with us so no one wanders. Nell stiffened. Tobin put one hand over the deck case. Lila's hand went to a card, then stopped. She looked at me first. Good. The gift rule had survived a city square. The boss kept smiling. Survive to the vault bell, and the shelter debt clears. Fail, and everything you brought pays the street. That is not a bet, Nell said. That is a trap. The boss leaned toward her. That is business. Valeria's hood turned toward me. This time, she did not need to speak. I knew it was a trap. The crowd knew it was a trap. The children in the shelter knew it so clearly that one of them started crying before anyone moved. But Nell's shelter was marked. Tobin's deck was already a rumor. My produce had just healed a fever in front of a starving square. If we walked away, the Tusk crew would return after dark with more knives and less audience. So I took the tomato basket back from the ledger man. He let go fast. I looked at the boss. The shelter debt clears before we enter. He snorted. You are in no position to bargain. 0. Valeria lifted one finger inside her sleeve. The statue above us cracked from crown to chin. A pebble fell and hit the boss's boot. Nobody breathed. I smiled because panic sometimes needs a coat. Before we enter, I said again. The boss looked up at the cracked statue, then at Valeria's hood, then at the basket like he was rewriting the price of every object in the square. He tore the debt page out of the ledger and threw it at Nell's feet. Nell picked it up with shaking hands. The children behind the window began to cheer. The Tusk crew backed away from the shelter door. That should have been the end. It was never the end. The boss bowed with fake courtesy and pointed toward the western gate, where gold light leaked from a black stone arch. Tonight then, he said. Gold Vault Labyrinth. Bring the basket, bring the deck, bring the doll, and bring the hood. His eyes stayed too long on Valeria, then on Nell, then on the true deck at Tobin's side. At the time, that should have been enough warning. Instead, I tightened my grip on a basket of tomatoes worth more than gold and followed a smiling thief toward a dungeon built to punish greed. The Gold Vault Labyrinth ranked us before the gate closed. The Tusk crew boss stood under the black stone arch, slapped the brass gauge beside it, and made every person put a hand on the plate like we were livestock at auction. He got the same red tusk mark as before. His knife men got smaller red marks. Tobin got a flicker of blue from the true deck at his belt, which made the crowd whisper, "Cardmaster again." Lila got a green pulse that smelled like fresh leaves. Nell got nothing from her hand. The cloth doll under her arm opened one button eye. The gauge screamed. The sound made 3 crewmen step back and every child from the shelter doorway hide behind Nell at once. Nell hugged the doll tighter. I got 0 again. The boss laughed so hard he had to wipe his eyes. Perfect! The miracle farmer is a pack mule. One knife man bowed at my basket like it was already cargo under new ownership. I moved the basket behind my leg. Valeria saw that and stepped half an inch closer to me, which made the knife man remember somewhere else he needed to stand. Then Valeria touched the plate. The needle shivered like it had seen death in court and been asked to testify. I said, small. Valeria's hood turned a fraction toward me. The needle dropped and stopped at the boss's red tusk mark. His laughter came back. That was his first mistake inside the labyrinth. He believed the gauge. The first rule of the Gold Vault Labyrinth was carved over the arch in plain letters, take what you can carry. Below it, someone had scratched a second line with a knife, pay what you owe. The boss spread his arms. Nobody leaves until the guardian wakes. Stay useful and we all get rich. Get in my way and the labyrinth keeps you. The gate dropped behind us. Stone swallowed daylight. The first chamber glittered with coins, gold cups, and little statues of kings nobody remembered. The Tusk crew ran toward the piles like hungry dogs. Tobin did not move. Lila looked at me. Nell looked at the floor. Valeria looked bored, which was worse than angry because bored, Valeria started inventing entertainment. I pulled 3 bananas from the basket. The boss stared. You brought fruit to a dungeon? I was invited for the basket. Nell's hands were shaking. Lila's lip was split from the square. One of the younger knife men had a fever rash like the boy outside the shelter and was trying to hide it under his collar. I gave 1 banana to Nell, 1 to Lila, and 1 to the knife man. Valeria's hood snapped toward me. You feed him? He is shaking. He threatened children an hour ago. He is also about to bleed on my tomatoes. The knife man looked like he wanted to refuse out of pride. Then the first trap woke. Gold coins lifted from the floor and unfolded into beetles with human teeth. The Tusk crew stopped laughing. The beetles swarmed. Nell, Lila, and the fevered knife man all bit the bananas at the same time. The chamber exploded with 3 different colors. Green light wrapped Lila's arms. She drew the shield card before the beetles reached Tobin, and a barn door shield slammed down hard enough to flatten the front row of gold insects. Warm yellow light rolled over Nell. Her doll seams pulled tight. It kicked 1 button leg free of its cloth body and stabbed a beetle through the face with a needle. The fevered knife man turned bright red, screamed, and punched a beetle so hard it burst into coins. He stared at his fist. Then he stared at me. More, he whispered. No, I said. That word saved him. A second knife man grabbed an apple from my basket without asking. The apple rotted in his hand. Not spoiled. Rotted. Black juice ran between his fingers and the smell hit the chamber like a dead cellar. The knife man dropped it and screamed. Valeria smiled under her hood. The fruit has taste. The fruit has boundaries, I said. The Tusk crew boss saw the rotted apple, saw the glowing knife man, and did not learn the right lesson. Greedy people rarely do. They think the rule is meant for other hands. He pointed deeper into the chamber. Move. Zero carries the basket. Cardman stays in the middle. Shelter girl stays where I can see her. Nell flinched at that. Valeria did not. She stepped so close to the boss that the coins at his feet melted into little puddles. He swallowed. Then he looked at the gauge mark still glowing red on his wrist and remembered the wrong confidence. You measured the same as me, he said. Valeria's voice was soft. Yes, I grabbed her sleeve again. Later, I said. I dislike that word. I know. The labyrinth made sure later arrived fast. Before the bridge, the corridor opened into a room with 1 gold mouth carved into the wall. Its lips were shut around a row of square teeth. Above it, the same scratched line appeared again. Pay what you owe. The Tusk crew boss grinned and shoved Nell forward. Shelter girl owes. Nell stumbled. Her doll bit his sleeve and got swatted into the wall. The gold mouth opened. Inside was not treasure. Inside was a tunnel full of little black tags, each one stamped with a tusk and a tooth-marked circle. The debt pages from the shelter fluttered inside it like dead birds. Nell's face went white. The boss said, The labyrinth recognizes contracts. No, I said. The mouth turned toward me. That was not a metaphor. The whole wall bent. I grabbed a loaf of farm bread from the basket and threw it in before the teeth reached Nell. The mouth bit down. Gold light burst between its teeth. The black tags inside caught fire one by one, and every fake debt page screamed in a different adult voice. The Tusk crew backed away. Nell's doll crawled back to her ankle and clung there, one button eye cracked. The gold mouth spat out a pile of clean coins at Nell's feet. Each coin had a tiny shelter door stamped on it. Nell stared. That pays repairs for a year. The boss stared harder. He had dragged us into the labyrinth to own the basket. Instead, the basket had just made the labyrinth pay the girl he was trying to crush. That should have taught him the basket was not for him. It taught him to want it more. The second chamber had a bridge made of gold chains over a pit full of sleeping statues. Each statue had a black earmark buried in its chest, pulsing faintly under stone skin. The boss wanted to pry them loose. Tobin said, Those marks are alive. The boss said, Then they are valuable. He sent 2 knife men onto the bridge. The chains snapped. The statues opened their eyes. Nell's doll climbed onto her shoulder and hissed through thread teeth. The falling knife men screamed. Valeria folded her arms. They chose greed. They chose a boss, I said. That is usually worse. She looked at me. Please, I added, because I am not above manners when people are dropping into a gear pit. Valeria clicked her tongue, flicked one finger, and pinned both knife men to the wall by their belts before the statues could reach them. The crew saw it. The boss saw it. His expression changed again. Not fear yet. Calculation. He had watched fruit heal, fruit reject thieves, cards block traps, dolls stab beetles, and a hooded woman move men with one finger. A smarter man would have apologized to the shelter, returned the debt page twice, and retired to sell soup. I did not know his exact plan yet. I only saw him stop looking at people and start looking at handles, straps, and ownership. The corridor after the chain bridge tried one more trick. Gold mirrors rose from the floor and showed each person what the labyrinth thought they wanted. The fevered knife man saw himself healthy and ran face first into the glass. It shattered into harmless straw because he had not reached for it with both hands. He stared at the straw, then stepped back like a man discovering restraint by accident. Tobin saw a hall full of people chanting, "Card Master." He shut his eyes and put one hand over the deck. The mirror dimmed. Lila saw a green forest road and her mother's shadow at the end. She almost moved. Tobin caught her shoulder. She did not fight him. Nell saw a shelter with no doors, no locks, no dolls needed. Her broken doll pressed its cloth hand against her wrist until she breathed again. I saw Havenacre with a fixed fence, quiet chickens, and no one asking me to save anything. Then the mirror added a golden throne and my cabbage rose. I threw a potato at it. The mirror broke. Valeria looked at the pieces, then at me. You rejected a throne with a potato. Was in the wrong row. The boss watched all of that and saw only one lesson. The labyrinth offered desire to people brave enough to take it. He looked at my basket again. That told me enough. The third chamber held no coins. It held a golden dragon statue chained to the floor by black roots. The statue was larger than my barn. Its wings were folded tight. Its head rested on its claws. A collar of dark metal teeth bit into its throat. Valeria stopped walking. Not dramatically. That would have been easier. She stopped like her body remembered something her mouth refused to say. The boss noticed. So did I. Cracked golden scale lay near the statue's front claw. The true deck at Tobin's side warmed, and the cloth around it smoked. Lila grabbed the case. Dad! The boss moved. He slammed his elbow into Tobin's ribs and ripped the deck case free. Tobin hit the floor. Lila drew a card. A knife man caught her wrist. Nell's doll leaped and bit his hand. The boss laughed and ran for my basket next. I swung the basket away. He kicked my knee. I went down hard enough to see sparks. He grabbed the basket, shoved 3 tomatoes and 2 bananas into his mouth, and tore the cloth off the true deck. The cards flashed. The golden dragon statue opened one eye. The boss looked triumphant for half a second. Then the fruit in his mouth turned black. His throat bulged. The red tusk mark on his wrist split open, and a black gear crawled out under his skin like a beetle trying to wear a man. He screamed, but greed kept both hands locked around the deck and basket. The black gear sank into his chest. Bone cracked. His vest tore. Tusks grew from his jaw, curved wrong, and pierced his own cheek. The crew backed away. Nell dragged Lila behind the broken shield card. Tobin crawled toward the deck, one hand pressed to his ribs. The mutated boss lifted his head. His eyes were black gears turning in wet sockets. Power now, he rasped. The words came from his mouth, but they sounded borrowed. Valeria's hood fell back. The chamber lost temperature. Every coin on the floor flattened. The mutated boss saw her face and laughed blood down his chin. There you are, the missing queen. I did not know how he knew that. I only knew the black gear in his chest reacted to Valeria like a starving dog smelling meat. He pointed one claw at the golden dragon. Wake, kneel, bring me her old throne. The dragon statue blinked again. Valeria whispered one word. Marigold. The gold cracked. Not like stone breaking, like a living thing shedding a coffin. A massive golden dragon lifted her head. Black roots snapped around her neck. Her eyes, molten and furious, fixed on Valeria. For one breath, nobody moved. Then Marigold cried. A dragon crying is not gentle. The sound hit the chamber walls, broke every fake crown in the treasure piles, and sent 3 tusk crewmen flat on their backs. Valeria's face changed. I had seen her angry, hungry, proud, suspicious, petty over pantry shelves. I had not seen her look wounded. The mutated boss charged before the moment could breathe. Mine, he snarled. That was his last mistake. Marigold slammed one claw down. The floor buckled. The mutated boss vanished under golden talons with the sound of a rotten barrel bursting. The true deck shot free and skidded across the floor toward Lila. Lila snatched it, then looked at me before drawing. Even terrified, she remembered the rule. I nodded. She drew the drain card. The dark bead that had been the boss's black gear tried to crawl out from under Marigold's claw. The drain card dragged it into a black pea. Nell's doll kicked the pea into a crack. Valeria crushed it with her heel. No speech, just heel, crack, smoke. The tusk crew dropped their weapons. The fevered knife man dropped to his knees and vomited black juice onto the gold floor. The fruit glow faded from him, leaving him alive and very interested in repentance. Tobin took the deck back with both hands shaking. Marigold lowered her enormous head until her snout touched the floor in front of Valeria. "My queen," the dragon said, voice like metal dragged through fire. "You are gone!" Valeria did not answer. The labyrinth gate opened behind us. The words over the arch changed back to "take what you can carry." Then, the second line burned brighter, "pay what you owe." The Tusk crew paid by crawling out without their boss, their ledger, their weapons, or their square. Nell carried the torn shelter debt page. Tobin carried the true deck. I carried my basket, now lighter by several tomatoes and a lot of trust in public invitations. Marigold followed us into the night, which made Stonebridge City discover a fresh category of panic. We did not explain the dragon to the crowd. There are some situations where explanation is just seasoning on disaster. Valeria told Marigold to stay low. Marigold tried. A dragon staying low still looks like a golden roof with teeth. By the time we reached Havenacre near dawn, Bolt was waiting at the gate. His ears were forward. His chest hatch was open. The instant Marigold crossed the broken barrier line, Bolt fired the porch cannon. Marigold sneezed, and the blast turned into sparks across her nose. Bolt barked like the universe had personally insulted him. "Bolt, no!" I shouted. Valeria stepped between them and put one hand on Bolt's dented head. "She is mine," Valeria said. Bolt's eyes flickered. His tail clicked twice. A blue system panel flashed over his collar. "SAFE! List updated, Marigold!" Marigold lowered her head to sniff him. Bolt growled. Marigold sneezed again. 3 apple trees bloomed out of season. For one stupid second, I thought we had traded a street gang for a dragon and maybe come out ahead. Then Marigold looked past Valeria at my broken porch, my torn barrier, and the monster lines still guarding the road. 500 outside years, she said. I stopped. Valeria went perfectly still. Marigold's golden eyes dimmed. "That is how long you were missing from the world. Malric Crow wears your absence like a crown. The Black-Ear Guild is not searching for you anymore." She looked at the Pepper Rose, the house, then Valeria. "They are building a queen without you." Marigold's warning made Stonebridge City treat the true deck like salvation and bait at the same time. That was how cities work. If something saved them, they wanted rules around it. If something scared them, they wanted someone else to stand closer to it. Tobin and Lila were suddenly useful. Nell was suddenly dangerous. I was still officially zero magic, which meant everyone felt comfortable asking me to explain miracles I barely survived. Valeria's answer was simple. "Let me burn the square," she said. "No public craters. You keep saying that as if it improves with repetition." It does for me. We went back to Nell's shelter before the city could turn fear into policy. The front room smelled like soup, wet blankets, and old thread. Real children hid under tables and behind crates. 3 smaller figures sat by the window with blankets tucked to their chins. They smiled at us. Then one blinked sideways. I stopped. Nell saw me notice. Her face tightened. "They are not children." The figure by the window lifted one cloth hand and waved. Doll joints showed under the blanket. Valeria's shadow stretched across the floor. "Explain." Nell hugged her own doll to her ribs. When the Tusk crew first came, the little ones screamed. The dolls woke up screaming back. After that, the crew would hit the dolls first. The real children had time to hide. That sentence was too ugly to sit in a room with soup, so I moved before it could become a speech. A broken doll lay near the stove. One button eye was cracked. Black thread leaked from its mouth. A tiny black gear splinter had lodged under its cloth chest, ticking like a bug in a wall. Valeria raised one hand. The doll's seams began to smoke. I stepped between them. "No! It's corrupted. It is also lying on the floor. It could eat a child's face." "Then let me fix its teeth first." Nell looked at me like I had just offered to pet a bear trap. Valeria looked worse. "You repair curses now?" "I repair things that scare me. It gives my hands somewhere to put the panic." I knelt, pulled farm thread from my coat pocket, and threaded a needle with fingers that were only shaking a little. The beginner system flashed beside the stove. "Corrupted vessel detected. Suggested action. Destroy." I closed it with my elbow. The broken doll snapped its head toward my hand and bit the needle. Nell gasped. Valeria smiled like I had finally proved her point. I flicked the doll on its button nose. "Rude," I said. The doll froze. Nobody in the room breathed. I took the needle back and stitched the torn mouth shut with farm thread. The black thread fought me. It hissed. It burned tiny holes in my sleeve. It tried to crawl into my skin. Valeria caught it between 2 fingers. The thread screamed. She looked at me. "This is the part where a sensible man lets me burn it. I've never been accused of that." I tied the final knot and pressed one tomato leaf from my basket over the black gear splinter. The leaf turned silver. The splinter cracked. The doll sat up. Nell covered her mouth. The real children peeked out from hiding. The repaired doll stood on wobbling legs, looked at me, then at Nell, then dragged a wooden spoon from the soup pot like a sword. "What is its name?" Nell whispered. The doll tilted its head. I should have said I did not name other people's nightmares. Instead, I said, Ravel. The doll tapped the spoon against its stitched chest. The black curse that had been crawling through it folded inward, twisted around the farm thread, and became a little shield mark over its heart. Ravel marched to the door, climbed onto a stool, and stood guard. The children cheered. Nell cried without making a sound. Valeria crossed her arms. You gave the curse a post. It needed a job. You give everything a job. I'm a farmer. You are a menace with sewing supplies. That was the first time Nell laughed. Small laugh. Broken laugh. Still a laugh. The shelter shifted around it. Not fixed, not healed, but no longer waiting to be hit. That should have been the day's win. Stonebridge City was too greedy for one win. By noon, two kinds of brave people had gathered outside the shelter. The first kind wanted to burn every doll before the dolls decided to become children. The second kind wanted to put the true deck in a locked box for public safety, which sounded very public and not safe at all. A guard captain reached for Tobin's deck case. Tobin stepped back. Lila drew half a card, stopped herself, and looked at me. I looked at the crowd, the dolls in the window, the real children under the tables, and the officials already pretending this was a controlled situation. No hiding room, I said. If they want proof, they get proof where everyone can see who panics first. Valeria smiled under her hood. Finally, a public humiliation, public demonstration, that is what I said. The guard captain tried to reach again. Ravel tapped his boot with the wooden spoon. He looked down at the doll, then at Valeria's hood, then at Lila's hand hovering over the deck. He discovered patience. By afternoon, the square had turned into an arena. Not a formal meeting. I would have walked out of that. This was worse and better, a public bet. Tobin stood on a raised platform with the true deck in both hands. Lila stood beside him, shoulders square, eyes scanning for civilians the way I had taught her. Nell stood near the shelter children with Ravel at her feet. Valeria stayed under her hood at my left, radiating enough contempt to season the air. The sign over the platform read, GRE, DRE, demonstration. I had not approved the word guild. Tobin had. He looked guilty when I read it. Cardmaster, the crowd whispered. Zero farmer, someone whispered about me. Valeria heard that one. The whisperer immediately found somewhere else to stand. A Silverblade Guild champion stepped onto the platform to test the deck. He wore polished armor, a white cloak, and the kind of calm face people trust because they have never had to watch it crack. The crowd cheered for him. Even Tobin bowed. The champion raised one hand. Stonebridge City needs proof that these cards protect citizens, not just their owners. That was fair. Then he looked at Nell. And proof that cursed dolls will not replace the children they claim to defend? That was not fair. Ravel lifted its spoon. I put one boot gently in front of the doll. Not yet, I said. The champion noticed the motion and gave me a polite smile. You command the doll too? No, I negotiate with violent household objects. Valeria made a soft sound that was almost approval. The crowd laughed. The laugh mattered. It turned Ravel from monster to menace with manners. That was not safety, but it was a better starting line. The champion placed 3 clay targets along the platform edge. First card! No civilians touched! Lila looked at me first. I nodded. She drew the beast card. The wooden boar burst out, saw the crowd, and dug its hooves into the boards until splinters flew. Lila whispered, targets only. The boar charged sideways, smashed all 3 clay targets, then sat down with its tusks pointed away from the front row. The child behind the rope clapped before his mother could stop him. Lila exhaled. The champion's smile warmed. Control improving. That was the right reaction. It gave the city a reason to trust her instead of just fear the deck. Then he nodded again. Second card, defense. Lila drew the shield card. A barn door shield snapped into place between her and the champion. The crowd murmured. Real murmurs, useful murmurs, the kind that move a city 1 inch away from panic. The champion struck the shield with his sword. The shield held. He struck again. The card dimmed. Lila set it down before greed woke, just like Tobin had taught her. Good! The champion's smile warmed. Control confirmed. For one breath, I thought the public part would work. Then the black ear under his armor woke up. It burst through his breastplate like a black flower made of teeth. The crowd screamed. The champion dropped his sword and grabbed his own chest. I did not, he choked. That was all he got out before the gear wrapped his ribs and lifted him off the platform. Power now. Soul later. No lecture needed. The later had arrived in public. A city clerk near the platform shouted, Stop the exhibition, another official yelled. Secure the deck. 2 guards ran toward Tobin instead of the possessed champion. I grabbed the nearest tomato crate and slammed it in their path. No, I said. The danger is on stage. They looked at my zero magic wrist stamp and hesitated. Valeria leaned toward them. They chose wisdom and stopped. The champion's body twisted. Black cables shot from the gear in his chest and lashed toward Lila. Lila drew the dog card. The wooden dog burst out, barked like a chair scraping, and bit one cable in half. Bolt would have hated it. The crowd loved it for half a second. Then a second cable hit the platform near a child who had crawled too close to see. The black ear cracked loose from the champion and skittered across the boards toward the child like a metal spider. Nell screamed the child's name. Ravel moved before anyone else. The little doll jumped from the crate, spoon raised, and landed between the crawling gear and the child. The gear opened like a mouth. Ravel jammed the wooden spoon inside it. The spoon blackened. Ravel's stitched shield mark flared silver. I ran. Valeria was faster, but she had to stay small. I did not. Being zero magic is very freeing when everyone already expects nothing. I reached the platform, grabbed the tomato crate with both hands and dropped it over the crawling black gear. It hit the crate from inside. Once. Twice. Then Valeria stepped on the lid. Gently, for her. The crate flattened. The gear cracked. Black smoke hissed out and tried to form teeth. Lila drew the drain card and slapped it against the boards. The smoke dragged into a bead. The champion was still hanging from the black cables, alive but bent backward, and the gear stump in his chest tried to regrow teeth. Tobin drew one card, then stopped and looked at Lila. That mattered. A father with power let the daughter on stage make the call. Lila drew the glow card. Warm light wrapped the champion's ribs and held them in place. He screamed once, then sucked in air like a man pulled back from a cliff by his collar. The crowd stopped pushing toward the exits. Valeria leaned close to me. The card saves an enemy witness. Trusted champion, I said. Gear victim. Both. She watched Lila hold the glow steady and did not argue. I filed that silence as a tiny disaster for Valeria's pride. The clown card popped out without permission, kicked the bead into the air, and smacked it with a pie made of sunlight. The bead exploded into harmless glitter. The crowd went silent. The clown bowed. Ravel bowed back with the blackened spoon. The crowd lost its mind. That reaction mattered because it changed sides. A minute earlier, they wanted the deck caged and Nell watched. Now they had seen the deck protect Lila without eating her, Ravel shield a child without turning on him, and Blackgear crawl out of a trusted champion in broad daylight. The Silverblade Guild champion collapsed, alive, armor split open, gear gone. He looked at Lila from the floor. Cardmaster, he whispered. Tobin flinched like the title had hit him again. Lila did not flinch. She stepped forward, put the shield card between the champion and the crowd and said, "No farm gifts near civilians without asking." The crowd heard that. So did the officials. So did every person who had been waiting for a reason to steal the deck in the name of safety. The rule was not a document. It was a child still breathing behind a doll with a spoon. The city accepted it because the alternative had just tried to crawl across the stage. One official tried to make it sound like his idea. The city authorizes temporary supervised deployment, he announced. Ravel pointed the blackened spoon at the crushed crate where the gear had been. The official swallowed. Under Miss Grell's safety rule. Lila did not smile. That made the crowd respect her more. People trust power more when it does not beg to be admired. Tobin looked like he might cry and argue with a title at the same time. He chose neither. He stood behind his daughter and let the crowd see who held the deck now. That was how the guild was born. Not paperwork, not applause. A father stepping back while the city watched the daughter keep a monster from reaching a child. By sunset, the Grellcar Guild had a platform, not a palace. Nell's shelter had guards who stood outside instead of collecting money. The Tusk crew remnants had disappeared so fast, they left their Tusk stamps scraped off 3 doors. I should have been relieved. I was mostly hungry. Valeria watched Lila answer questions from a ring of nervous fighters and narrowed her eyes. She is getting more attention than the person who crushed the gear. You are trying to stay hidden, can be hidden and properly appreciated. That is not usually how hidden works. Nell approached with Ravel at her heel. She held out the torn doll I had repaired, then pulled it back like she was afraid I would ask for it. I raised both hands. It has a job here. Ravel saluted with the spoon. Valeria looked at the doll. If it bites me, I burn the spoon. Ravel slowly lowered the spoon. Good instincts. Then the western gate exploded inward, not from magic, from bolt. My mechanical dog came through the smoke with scorch marks along his ribs, mud on his paws, and a woman draped across his back. The arena went quiet in pieces. First the crowd, then the Silverblade Guild fighters, then Tobin. The woman on Bolt's back wore torn white armor, her sword arm hung wrong, her hair was stuck to her face with blood. A broken silver badge was still pinned at her shoulder. One Silverblade Guild fighter whispered, Corave! Another dropped to one knee. The Sword Saint! Bolt limped to me, lowered himself, and let the strongest swordswoman alive slide into my arms like someone had snapped the title in half. Her sword was missing. That scared the Silverblade Guild fighters more than the blood. Valeria looked toward the road Bolt had broken through, and for once she did not make a joke about another woman arriving at my feet. That scared me more than the sword. Cora opened one eye. "Do not," she whispered, "let the axe follow me." Then she passed out. The strongest swordswoman alive woke up in my guest room and asked where the battlefield was. Valeria Thorn stood at the foot of the bed with my blue mug in her hand and asked why another woman was bleeding on her blanket. That was how the next disaster started. Nobody argued. That alone worried me. Cora Vey tried to sit up. Her sword arm folded wrong. Her white armor had been cut open from shoulder to hip. One silver badge still clung to the strap like pride was refusing to evacuate. Bolt sat by the door with mud on his paws, pretending he had not broken Stonebridge City's western gate to bring her home. Cora looked at him, then at me. "How far did it follow?" "Far enough that my dog considered city property optional." Her eyes sharpened. "Then move me outside. If the axe reaches your house, it will split the foundation just to hear the scream." Valeria lifted one eyebrow. "Dramatic." Cora turned her head and finally saw Valeria clearly. For half a second, the sword saint forgot her broken ribs. Then she tried to grab a weapon. She had no sword. That scared her more than Valeria did. "The Thorn Queen," Cora whispered. Valeria smiled over the rim of the mug. "The bleeding woman recognizes me. Good. That makes one competent guest." "She is not a guest," I said. Valeria looked at the blanket. "She is under my blanket. It is my blanket. It is on my couch sometimes. It has defected." Cora stared between us like the world had cracked in a more personal way than her arm. That was when a piece of wood fell from Bolt's shoulder seam and hit the floor. Just a splinter. Brown, ragged, probably from the arena gate or my porch rail. Cora saw it and went still. "May I?" she asked. I picked it up and placed it in her good hand. Cora drew a broken shard of silver from inside her boot. It was all that remained of her sword. 3 inches of sacred edge, cracked near the hilt and humming like a trapped mosquito. She pressed the blade to the farm splinter. "The silver chipped!" The wood did not. Outside the open window, 2 Silverblade fighters who had followed Bolt from the city saw the test. One of them had a ceremonial dagger at his belt. He pulled it halfway out, looked at the farm splinter, and pushed the dagger back like it had embarrassed his family. Cora saw that too. A title can survive blood. It has a harder time surviving a porch chip humiliating everyone's metal. Cora's face changed. Valeria stopped drinking. Cora tried again, slower. The farm splinter shaved a curl from the sacred steel like it was whittling kindling. The room went quiet enough for Atlas to ruin it. From the umbrella bucket, the prophecy sword said, "I have been warning everyone that household storage is unnatural." Cora looked at me with the kind of fear experts get when the smallest thing in the room beats their life's work. "What technique made this wood?" "I think that was porch rail." "What school?" "Carpentry." She closed her fist around the splinter. "Then teach me your carpentry before the axe arrives." That was the first bad sign. The sword saint had not been awake for 3 minutes, and she already wanted the secret of a wood chip. Cora tried to swing her legs off the bed. Valeria pushed one finger against her forehead and pressed her back down. Cora's eyes flashed. Valeria said, "If you bleed on the floor, the farmer will fuss. I find his fussing tedious. I must return to my guild. If the Silverblade Guild depends on you crawling back with one arm, it deserves embarrassment." Cora's jaw tightened. There was the rule, ugly and clean. If Cora returned broken, Silverblade's name cracked with her. If the axe followed her here, Havenacre got dragged into whatever had snapped the strongest formal sword in the north. I did not want either, so I did what I could. I fed her. Cora looked at the bowl of rice, eggs, and chopped greens like it was a weapon disguised as breakfast. Valeria leaned against the bedpost. "Eat. It will either repair you or insult you." "That is not comforting," Cora said. "It is accurate," I said. Cora ate one bite. Her broken sword arm snapped straight. She screamed. "I dropped the spoon!" Valeria grabbed her shoulder before she could bolt upright. Bolt barked once, and the bed frame sprouted 4 little wooden braces around Cora's legs to keep her from falling. The braces had not been there before. Cora stared at them. I stared harder. "Bed," I said. "No improvising without permission." The braces froze. Cora's breathing shook. The color came back into her face, but black lines stayed under the skin at her wrist, little tooth marks, like the Blackyear had kissed her bones and left debts behind. Valeria saw them. Her expression lost the petty edge. "Power now," she said. Cora swallowed. "Soul later. No lecture needed." She lifted the farm splinter again. "The axe cut through my sword because my sword tried to dominate it. This wood resisted by doing nothing." "That sounds like wood. That sounds like a secret." She pointed at my shelf with the broken silver shard. "What forms do you practice?" "I stretch after chores." Valeria's mouth curved. "He calls everything that humiliates experts a chore." Cora did not laugh. "Show me." Before I could refuse, the north fence screamed. Not the monster line, the fence. A sound came across the field in sharp wooden cracks, one after another, like something was testing posts for honesty. Bolt's ears flattened. Valeria set the mug down. Cora shoved herself up, braces splintering away from the bed. "I told you," she said. The axe had arrived. It came through the monster guards without rushing. The first guard monster lowered its head to Valeria's aura and tried to block the path. The axe split it down the middle and kept floating. It was not big. That made it worse. It had a plain iron head, a dark handle, and black gear roots wrapped around its throat like a collar. Every time it moved, the grass leaned away. Every stump in the yard bled black sap. The Silverblade fighters who had followed Bolt from the city stopped at the broken gate. One of them lifted a spear. Cora shouted, "Do not strike it!" Too late. The spear hit the axe head. The spear aged 100 years in one breath, rusted into powder, and fell through the fighter's hands. The fighter dropped to his knees. The axe turned toward my porch. Atlas rattled in the umbrella bucket. Finally, a tool with worse manners than mine. Valeria lifted her hand. Black fire gathered. I stepped in front of her. "No." The whole yard looked at me. Even the axe. Valeria's voice went low. "That thing is corrupted. So was Revel. Revel is cloth with teeth. This is a murder tool. It is an axe. It cut the sword saint apart. It followed her to my woodpile." Cora staggered beside me, one hand pressed to her ribs. "Farmer, if you have a plan, make it insulting quickly." I did not have a plan. Then the axe turned, and I saw the handle. There was a burn mark near the grip, a crooked little crescent, where I had once leaned an old axe too close to the stove in my first winter at Havenacre. I had wrapped the handle with twine afterward because the blister rubbed my palm. My hand remembered before my head did. "Mabel?" I said. The axe froze. Valeria looked at me. "You named an axe. I was lonely." Atlas made a strangled sound. "You named the axe before the sacred sword? Used her more." The black ear roots on the axe snapped tight. The yard filled with a thin, high scream. Not from Cora, not from the fighters, from the axe. Every log in the woodpile split itself in panic. Cora whispered, "That name struck deeper than my sword." The axe shot toward me. Bolt lunged. I held out one hand. No. Bolt hit the ground hard enough to dig furrows but stopped. Mabel's blade stopped 1 inch from my chest. The cold coming off her made my shirt stiff. I could have stepped back. I should have stepped back. Instead, I reached for the handle. Black roots bit into my palm. Valeria moved. I said, "No burning." She stopped, and the effort made the porch boards crack under her feet. I wrapped my fingers around the twine grip. The axe shook like a furious animal. A memory hit my hand, not my head. Rainy mornings. Splitting wood before sunrise, tossing Mabel aside when Atlas first fell into the yard, and the system screamed that a true hero did not need farm tools. I had not thought about that in years. Mabel clearly had. "I am sorry," I said. The axe tried to cut the apology in half. The blade twitched toward my neck, so I dragged her to the chopping block. Cora stared. "What are you doing?" "What she knows." I set one log upright. Mabel yanked against my hands, hungry for blood, walls, titles, anything important enough to punish. I gave her firewood. The first chop split the log clean. Black sap sprayed from the blade. The roots around her handle loosened. Valeria stepped closer. "That worked." "Do not sound surprised. I am always surprised when your cowardice becomes strategy." "Same." The axe shook again. I set another log. Mabel came down harder. The second split rang through the yard. The monster guards lowered their heads. The Silverblade fighters stared like someone had just defeated a battlefield with chores. Cora gripped the farm splinter against her chest. "She was not attacking for victory," Cora said. "She wanted recognition." "She wanted a job," I said. I set the third log. Mabel hesitated. Then the blade dropped by itself. Split. The black ear collar cracked. A bead of black metal popped out of the handle and skittered across the porch. Valeria crushed it under her heel. Heel, crack, smoke! Mabel went limp in my hands. The iron head shrank back to plain iron. The dark roots fell away as dead string. The handle warmed, not alive exactly, but known. A small voice came from the blade, rough as old bark. "You picked the shiny one." Atlas shot upright in the umbrella bucket. "I am a sacred weapon." Mabel's blade angled toward it. "Shiny." The Silverblade fighters made a noise I will never forget. The sound of trained warriors realizing their guild crisis had become a family argument between tools. Cora slowly lowered herself to one knee. Not to me, not to Valeria, but to the axe. "The North called it burial axe," she said. "I lost my sword to an abandoned farm tool with hurt feelings." Mabel hummed once. It sounded smug. Valeria looked at me. "You will not be allowed to name any more kitchen items. The kettle already has opinions. I will destroy the kettle." The kettle whistled from inside the house. That broke the yard just enough for Cora to laugh once, then hiss in pain. The laugh mattered. It put breath back in her. But the black ear marks under her skin were still there. Cora held up the farm splinter. Now show me the movement. I told you I stretch. Then stretch. So I went inside, grabbed the old Tai Chi pamphlet from the shelf, and came back to the yard while 2 guild fighters, a demon queen, a prophecy sword, a recovered axe, a mechanical dog, and half a monster fence watched me unfold the Tai Chi pamphlet. Valeria read the title. Her eyes narrowed. This is a children's exercise sheet. It has diagrams. Cora took it like holy scripture. No, I said, borrow. Do not join Atlas in stealing household items. Atlas muttered. I was chosen. You were stored. Cora ignored us. Demonstrate the first diagram. I raised my hands. Nothing happened. One Silverblade fighter exhaled, disappointed. Then I shifted my weight. The farm went quiet. Not silent like Valeria's first spell, quiet like a field before seeds break. The dust around my boots lifted in a circle. The split logs rolled upright. The laundry line straightened itself. The black marks under Cora's skin stopped crawling. I turned my waist and pushed the air. The whole yard moved 1 inch without moving at all. That is the best way I can say it. The fence stayed put, but the thread around the fence slid aside. The porch stayed crooked, but every nail knew where it belonged. Even the monster guards at the road shifted their feet into neat rows like they had been caught slouching. Cora's mouth parted. Valeria stepped into the motion. Her aura hit the circle around me and did not crush it. It folded. Gold threads ran through the black shadow at her shoulders. The mud under her boots sprouted tiny red flowers and then immediately regretted looking too cute under her. Valeria looked down at them, then at me. For once, she did not look like she wanted to kill the problem. She looked like the problem had opened a door and politely not invited her first. Again, she said. Cora copied the first motion with her broken arm. The farm splinter in her hand glowed brown. The black tooth marks under her wrist peeled loose thread by thread and fell as a dry little gear root onto the grass. Mabel chopped it before anyone told her to. Cora sucked in air. Her shoulders settled. Her stance changed. Not healed completely. Better than healed. Redirected. The Silverblade fighters dropped to one knee so fast their armor clanged. Cora looked at them and finally stopped looking ashamed. She held the farm splinter like a blade and performed the first Tai Chi motion again. The wind bent around it. A clean cut opened in the air, slow and harmless, parting a drifting leaf without touching the stem. Cora whispered, Silverblade has been teaching people to strike harder. I folded the pamphlet. That seems like a sword guild thing. We needed to learn when not to strike. Valeria gave her a sharp look. Do not make him sound wise. It encourages him. I'm not encouraged, I said. I am hungry. That was when the cardboard hit my kitchen window. It was made from 3 little paper cards, a green glow, and Lila's panic. It bounced off the glass, slid down, and flapped upside down until Bolt opened the door with his nose. The bird landed in Tobin's empty tea mug and burst into Lila's voice. Ethan! Dad says not to worry, so worry. Ashgrove Forest sent family envoys. They asked for the true deck. Tobin's voice cut in, rough and tired. They say they can return my wife. Lila spoke again, smaller this time. They say all they need is the deck. Cora's new stance vanished. Valeria's flowers burned black under her boots. I looked at Tobin's empty mug, the recovered axe, the Tai Chi pamphlet in Cora's hand, and the cardboard already folding itself into ashes. Ashgrove had asked for the deck. The problem was, Tobin had already heard the one offer desperate men do not refuse. Ashgrove Forest welcomed Tobin Grell with a funeral arch and a bargain. That was how I knew the place was trouble. A real family welcome has soup, yelling, or at least one aunt pretending not to cry. Ashgrove had green lanterns, silent elves, and a sacred tree visible through the mist with a woman's sleeping face sealed inside the bark. Tobin stopped walking. Lila grabbed his sleeve with both hands. The woman in the tree had Lila's mouth. I did not need a genealogy lecture. I saw a grieving man, forget the rest of the world existed, and that was enough warning. The root speaker at the arch bowed to Lila, not to Tobin. Blood returns to blood. The mother can be restored. Tobin's hand went to the true deck at his belt. Valeria's hand went to the air beside his throat, ready to stop him if he got stupid. Cora Vey stood on my other side with a farm splinter tucked behind her broken armor like it was a sacred badge. This smells wrong. It is a forest, I said. It smells like metal teeth. That killed the joke fast. The rule was simple. If the true deck touched the wrong roots, it could save a family or drain a race. If black gear controlled the sacred tree, every elf in Ashgrove became a battery with pretty leaves. The root speaker smiled like he had not noticed the word trap hanging above his head. A line of Ashgrove guards stepped behind us with leaf-bladed spears. They did not point the blades at Valeria. They pointed them at Tobin. That told me the whole welcome was crooked. The human husband was allowed to ache, but not allowed to decide. Lila was half theirs, so they smiled at her. Tobin was only useful because grief had hands, and the true deck hung from his belt. One old guard tried to touch the deck case. Tobin caught his wrist. The guard stiffened. Lila stepped between them before anyone bled. He is my father. The root speaker's smile stayed soft. Human love is brief. Tree love preserves. Valeria made a small sound. Cora leaned toward me. If she laughs like that again, duck. The old guard looked at Valeria's hood. No queen shadow crosses the root circle. Valeria's hand opened. I said, we are having a conversation. We are being insulted by shrubbery, she said. The lanterns above us flickered. The woman in the bark opened one eye wider. Tobin saw that and almost forgot the insult, the spears, and every warning I had ever given him. That was why the trap worked. It did not need fools. It needed people with someone missing. All we need, he said, is the deck. No, I said. Tobin flinched like I had slapped him. Lila looked at me with wet eyes. Ethan, I said no to handing it over blind. I pointed at the woman in the bark. Show the cost first. The forest answered before the root speaker did. Vines shot out of the ground and wrapped Lila's ankles. Tobin lunged. Cora cut one vine with the farm splinter. The vine recoiled instead of bleeding. That told the watching elves more than a speech would have. Their proud, sacred root had just flinched from porch rail. Valeria lifted black fire in one hand. The vines tightened around Lila's legs. A young elf near the arch broke rank and swung his knife at the vine around Lila's ankle. The vine snapped up his arm. His green cloak went gray at the hem. His cheeks hollowed. The knife fell out of his hand and turned into a leaf before it hit the ground. The other guards did not help him. They looked at the root speaker. That reaction was the ugliest proof in the clearing. The guards were afraid of the tree they served. I threw my canteen at the vine around Lila. Farm water splashed over the root. Steam burst up. The vine loosened long enough for Lila to wrench 1 foot free and draw a card halfway from her sleeve. Then she stopped and looked at me through pain. Targets? She asked. Even with roots drinking her blood, she remembered civilians. Roots only, I said. She played the dog card. The wooden card dog appeared, barked like a scraping chair, and bit through the vine on the young elf's arm. He fell backward, alive but shaking, and stared at Lila like the person he had been guarding had just saved him from his own religion. Faces appeared under the bark behind her. Not carved faces, pressed faces. Elves with closed eyes, mouths full of leaves, skin drained pale green. I grabbed Valeria's wrist. Do not burn it. Her eye snapped to me. It touched the girl. It is full of people. Then it should not have made itself flammable. The root speaker's smile cracked. Good. I liked him less when he was comfortable. Tobin pulled the deck from his belt with shaking hands. If that is my wife. It is bait, Cora said. Tobin's face hardened. You do not know that? No, Cora said. I know bait. I lost a sword to it yesterday. Lila swallowed pain and looked at her father. Dad, ask first. That was the gift rule doing its job under family pressure. Tobin raised the deck but did not surrender it. Can she speak? The woman in the bark opened one eye. The whole forest leaned inward. The true deck warmed. One card pressed against the case from inside, trying to turn toward the tree, the archer card. Tobin saw it and broke. He stepped 1 pace closer. The roots moved faster than grief. They snapped around his wrist, tore the deck case free, and dragged the true deck into the bark. Every green lantern in Ashgrove went black. Valeria's patience died. She blasted the nearest root with a thin line of fire, not enough to burn the trapped souls, enough to make the root scream and drop Lila. Then the ground under me opened. I fell through leaves, dirt, and a very personal amount of humiliation. I hit a slope of wet roots, slid sideways, and landed knee-deep in a dark hollow under the forest. Above me, Valeria shouted my name. That was not comforting. Valeria shouting my name usually meant something was about to be punished for owning ears. A plant bigger than my pantry snapped at my leg. I kicked it in the teeth. It had too many teeth. The beginner system flashed in front of my face. Predatory flora detected. Suggested action. Combat stance. I threw a handful of fertilizer into the plant's mouth. The plant froze. Then it spat my boot out, wrapped every vine around the fertilizer sack, and made a noise like a cow finding religion. Fine, I said. You can have the bag. Do not eat the leg. The plant dragged the sack away, then opened a path through the roots like it had just accepted a bribe. Apparently Ashgrove diplomacy had become this. Fertilizer beat my thigh as a meal option. I crawled through the gap before it reconsidered. The root tunnel narrowed. Black gear marks pulsed under the bark, each one biting into a sleeping face. I heard Lila above me, then Tobin shouting, then a deck of cards snapping like wings in a storm. A root slapped across the tunnel. I pulled the farm chainsaw from my pack. It was a bad idea to bring a chainsaw to a sacred forest. It was a worse idea not to. The chainsaw coughed once before I pulled the cord. Then it started by itself. Easy, I told it. The blade clicked like teeth trying to be polite. The first root lunged. I cut it, not the sleeping face beside it, not the green vein under it, just the black metal thread wrapped around it. The root went slack, and the sleeping elf inside the bark took one clean breath. That was enough proof for me. I cut the next thread. The chainsaw purred. Some tools enjoy their work too much. By the time I reached the root chamber, my sleeves were torn, my boots were full of sap, and the chainsaw was acting smug. Behind me, the bribed plant followed with the fertilizer sack hugged under 3 vines. It spat one root out of my path, then another. Then it snapped at a black beetle crawling under the bark, chewed once, and recoiled like it had bitten the nail. Bad flavor? I asked. The plant nodded. I did not enjoy how many farm-adjacent objects had started understanding questions. The chainsaw growled at the beetle. The beetle tried to run. The plant pinned it with one vine and looked at me like it had brought a mouse to the door. So I cut the black ear thread holding the beetle to the root. The beetle crumbled into ash. The plant patted the fertilizer sack and opened a wider tunnel. That was our entire alliance. I fed it. It decided my enemies tasted worse. The sacred tree's heart was hollow. Valeria, Cora, Tobin, and Lila stood on a circle of roots around a black pool. The true deck floated over the water, open like a book. Cards spun around it, but the pictures were wrong. The shield card had teeth. The beast card had roots for legs. The clown card stood on the water without smiling, which was honestly the most disturbing thing it had ever done. And behind the deck stood a man-shaped copy wearing Malric Crow's face like a mask printed from old grief. Valeria saw him and went still. "Malric Crow," she said. The copy bowed. "Enough of him to remember worship, not enough of him to die when you killed the first pieces." I did not know how many pieces he meant. I did know the roots behind him leaned toward Valeria like starving snakes. Cora lifted the farm splinter. The Malric copy smiled at it. "Silverblade sent me one saint. Havenacre sends me a farmer with fertilizer." "Good summary," I said. "Give the deck back." He laughed. The deck answered him. A black barn door shield slammed between us and Tobin. A root boar burst from the water and charged Lila. Cora stepped into the Tai Chi motion she had learned that morning and turned the boar's tusks aside with the farm splinter. The boar crashed into a root wall and exploded into blank card scraps. Lila stared at Cora. Cora said, "Later." Valeria moved for the deck. The Malric copy flipped a card. A queen-shaped shadow rose out of the black pool. It wore Valeria's outline badly, like a thief wearing stolen armor 2 sizes too large. Black fire clung to its hands. A false crown grew from its brow. Valeria's face did not change. The ground around her feet turned to glass. The copy queen lifted its chin. "Thorn Queen replicated." Valeria stepped forward. The shadow struck first. Its black fire hit Valeria's palm and folded backward. The false crown cracked. The shadow staggered like a child trying to swing a warhammer. Valeria leaned close to it. "Do not borrow my face," she said. Then she slapped it. Not a spell, a slap. The sound snapped through the root chamber. The copy queen flew backward, hit the tree wall, and sank halfway into the bark. Every trapped elf in the tree flinched. I grabbed Valeria's sleeve again before she finished it. Her eyes burned. "Still full of people," I said. "I am aware. You looked less aware." I was choosing a precise murder. No murders in tree hearts. Cora, bleeding again, laughed once. "You have rules everywhere. They travel well." The Malric copy stopped laughing. He looked at the deck, then at me. That was when his mistake got arrogant enough to be useful. "If the queen's shape is crude," he said, "then we copy the source." The true deck turned all at once. Every card faced me. Tobin shouted, "Oh!" Lila drew a card from her sleeve and stopped because she could not tell where civilians ended and tree souls began. "Good girl!" The deck flashed white. The Malric copy spread his arms. "Replicate the creator." For one breath, nothing happened. Then the entire deck went blank. No shield, no beast, no clown, no archer. Just white cards, empty as winter fields. The root chamber made a sound like a giant choking. The copy queen dissolved. The root boar scraps fell flat. The tooth shield broke into harmless paper. The clown card, now blank, somehow managed to look offended. The Malric copy staggered back from the deck. "Impossible!" Valeria stared at the blank cards. Cora looked at me, then at the farm splinter, then at the blank cards. I did not feel powerful. I felt like the sort of man who had just watched a loaded wagon roll toward him and stop because the horse refused to admit he existed. Still, the reaction was delicious. The thing wearing Malric Crow's face had stolen a sacred tree, drained a bloodline, baited a father with his wife, and copied a demon queen badly. Then it tried to copy a farmer and broke its own prize. Lila moved first. She ran, slid across the root circle, and slapped both hands around the blank deck. "Ask!" I shouted. She froze with the deck in her hands. The roots lunged for her wrists. "May I take it back?" she cried. The cards flashed green. The wooden dog card appeared under her palm and bit 3 roots at once. The clown card returned just long enough to throw a pie into the black pool. The shield card snapped over Tobin and Lila, while Cora cut a path through the gear threads. Above the chamber, the root speaker shouted, "The forest has the right to blood property." Lila looked up through the crack in the roots. Her face changed. Not healed, not calm, decided. "My blood is not your property," she said. The true deck pulsed in her hands. That line did not break the tree. It broke the room's permission structure. 2 guards above dropped their spears. The young elf she had saved crawled away from the root circle instead of back into formation. The root speaker saw them move and screamed, "Traitors!" Valeria smiled. That smile had teeth, even without showing teeth. The Malric copy hissed. Valeria grabbed him by the throat. This time, I did not stop her. She did not burn him. She lifted him high enough that every root in the chamber strained toward his boots. "You built toys in my shape," she said. The copy's smile twitched. He looked scared now. That was better. A black root opened behind his spine. Before Valeria crushed his throat, a pulse shot from his back into the root. It carried one image clear enough for me to feel it in my teeth, Valeria's face. "Alive! Here!" The pulse vanished into the tree. Valeria's hand closed. The Malric copy shattered into dry bark. No blood, no body, just bark and one black seed that tried to crawl away. Mabel was not there, so Cora handled it. She stepped slowly, turned her wrist the way the pamphlet had shown her, and cut the seed in half with the farm splinter. The Silverblade path had officially become embarrassing. Then the sacred tree showed us the cost. A shard of glassy bark fell into the black pool. Valeria caught it before it sank. The chamber filled with a memory, short and cruel, Ashgrove elders pressing hands to the tree, the black ear marks blooming under their palms, the sleeping elves being fed into the roots one family at a time, while the woman in the bark stayed just out of reach. The root speaker had not been tricked by one bad root. He had bought hope with other people's lives. The memory broke. The root speaker above screamed. The sacred tree split from crown to root. All the green lanterns died. Inside the trunk, hundreds of elves hung in pale seed pods, breathing shallowly, drained almost empty. The woman in the bark was gone from sight, but the archer card in Lila's deck glowed once, then went quiet. Lila held the deck to her chest and sobbed without sound. Tobin wrapped one arm around her and stared at the dead tree like he had been offered his wife twice and robbed both times. Valeria looked at the split roots. Cora looked at the black pulse trail. I looked at my fertilizer-stained hands. We had the deck back. The copy had failed. That should have felt like a win. Instead, the sacred tree was dead, Ashgrove's people were drained, and somewhere beyond those black roots, Malric Crow had just learned Valeria Thorn was alive. Valeria Thorn could kill Ashgrove Forest. She could not cleanly revive it. That difference nearly got everyone burned. The sacred tree stood split open from root to crown, hollow as a robbed church. Pale elves hung in seed pods inside the trunk. Some breathed. Some only twitched when the black ear threads tightened around their ribs. The root speaker crawled away from the black pool, one arm gray to the elbow. Valeria lifted her hand. Black fire gathered into a thin, perfect blade. Cora Vey stepped between Valeria and the tree with a farm splinter in her fist. That was either bravery or brain damage. With Cora, I was still learning the difference. Valeria's eyes narrowed. "Move!" Cora's voice shook, but her stance did not. "If you burn the gear, you burn the bodies holding it. If I do nothing, they die slowly. That is not permission to do the enemy's work faster." The root speaker laughed from the floor. "The Thorn Queen understands mercy as destruction." Valeria turned her fire toward him. I stepped on his sleeve before he could crawl another inch. "No speeches from tree kidnappers," I said. The root speaker looked at my boot like a farmer's soul was the lowest possible insult. Good. It was about time he ranked something correctly. The rule was ugly and visible. If the tree stayed dead, Ashgrove collapsed with every soul trapped in it. If Valeria forced resurrection through raw power, she would bring back bodies with black ear teeth still biting inside them. We needed a farmer answer. Valeria tried anyway, not a wildfire, not one of her city-killing gestures. She pressed 2 fingers against a seed pod and pulled one thin black strand out of the elf inside. The pod opened. For half a breath, the elf sat up, then his eyes clicked. Tiny gear teeth unfolded behind his pupils, and his hands clawed toward Lila's deck like it was meat. A guard screamed, "He is alive!" "No!" Valeria said. She closed her fist. The pod sealed around him again before the gear could bite through his tongue. The guard rounded on her. "You buried him." Valeria looked at the guard so coldly the man forgot how to finish being brave. Cora lifted her farm splinter, cut one thread along the pod's edge, and the elf inside took a normal breath again. The guard saw that and dropped his anger with his spear. That was the hard proof. Valeria could force a door open, but black gear would follow through it. Cora could cut one latch at a time, but there were hundreds. The forest needed something that did not conquer the dead into standing up, Unfortunately, I was the farmer. Cora moved first. She raised the farm splinter, breathed the way the Tai Chi pamphlet showed, and turned her wrist slowly. A clean line opened through the air. Not a sword slash, not a spell, a gap. The black thread around one seed pod parted without touching the elf inside. The elf coughed. Every Silverblade fighter at the edge of the chamber saw it. One whispered, "Saint!" Cora did not look at him. She cut another thread. The second elf sucked in air and started crying sap. The result landed before anyone could explain it. The broken sword saint had found a path a normal blade could not take. Valeria lowered her fire by 1 inch. Cora's hand trembled. The black marks under her wrist tried to crawl back. I put my hand over hers and guided the pamphlet motion. Once. Raise. Turn. Settle. The mark stopped moving. Cora gave me an irritated look. Do not make that look easy. I'm deeply confused. That is worse. Lila climbed over a root with the true deck pressed to her chest. Tobin followed her with one arm around her shoulders and the other holding 3 blank cards that were slowly remembering their pictures. The archer card pulsed once inside the deck. Lila froze. "Mom?" she whispered. The card did not answer yet. That was cruel, but it was also a hook. Hope had learned caution. The root speaker saw the deck glow and reached for it. Valeria pinned his hand to the floor with one black nail of magic. He screamed. She smiled down at him. "That was restraint." "It was," I said. "I hate restraint." "I know." The old Ashgrove guard shuffled near the broken root circle. Half of them looked ready to kneel to Lila. The other half looked ready to pretend they had been innocent decoration the whole time. Lila saw them and lifted the deck. Every guard flinched. She did not draw. "No farm gifts near civilians without asking," she said. Her voice cracked in the middle, and somehow that made the rule stronger. She was scared, grieving, furious, and still holding the line. The young elf she had saved in the last chamber dropped his spear. Then another guard did the same. The root speaker's face twisted. "Ashgrove does not obey a half-blood child." Tobin moved. For a man who had spent the last hour being emotionally stabbed from every direction, he moved fast. He put himself between the root speaker and Lila and drew the shield card. The barn door shield came down with a boom. The root speaker's next words hit the shield and bounced back into his teeth. The clown card appeared on top of the shield, pointed at him, and shook its head like a disappointed teacher. Even Valeria looked slightly offended on behalf of villains everywhere. Lila breathed once. Then she looked at me. "Can we save them?" That was the question. Not whether Valeria could destroy the corruption. She could. Not whether Cora could cut some threads. She could, until her arm failed. Could we save Ashgrove without turning the deck into a throne? Valeria into a wildfire? Or me into the hero the system kept trying to manufacture? I looked at the dead soil around the sacred tree. Dead soil has a smell. Sour. Empty. Not evil. Just used up. It reminded me of office carpet after midnight, which was a stupid thought to have in a magical forest full of elf pods, but old lives pick rude moments. The beginner system flashed beside the dead trunk. Corruption source, vulnerable. Suggested action, purifying strike. Hero points reward, 10,000. I closed it. The panel returned. Suggested action, command allied forces. I closed it again. The panel returned a third time. Suggested action, accept hero route. I shoved my hand through it and grabbed the little apple twig tucked inside my coat. I had snapped it from a Havenacre tree before leaving because Tobin's message said, "Forest," and farmers trust cuttings more than promises. It had 2 leaves and no right to be important. Valeria saw it. "No," she said. "That made everyone more nervous." I looked at her. No as in impossible. No as in insulting to every ancient tree that ever terrorized the continent. Dead soil does not get to be picky. Cora stared at the twig. "That is your answer?" My answer was soup yesterday. The standard is low. Tobin gave a broken little laugh. Lila did not. The archer card pulsed again in her hands. The woman in the bark was still missing from the tree, but that card kept turning toward the dead trunk like a compass pointing at grief. I had one short thought before I moved. In my first life, I had spent years making other people rich, tired, and louder than me. When the system gave me a sword in this life, I chose seeds because seeds were the one kind of future that did not ask me to kill somebody first. Then I got on my knees in dead sacred soil and dug with my hands. The root speaker laughed again. "A farm cutting in a world tree grave." I threw a handful of fertilizer into the hole. The laugh stopped. The bribed carnivorous plant from the tunnel poked one vine through a crack, saw the fertilizer, and leaned forward with deep personal interest. "Not yours," I told it. The plant recoiled like I had insulted its family. Side chaos has many forms. Sometimes it is a meat-eating plant trying to rob a resurrection. I planted the twig. Nothing happened. That was the worst second of the day. The root speaker smiled through broken teeth. A few Ashgrove guards looked away. Valeria stepped closer, not mocking now. "Farmer!" "No!" Poured the last of the farm water over the twig. Still nothing. Then Lila walked forward. Tobin tried to stop her. She shook him off and placed the archer card beside the twig. Ask, she whispered. The card flashed green. A woman's voice came out of it, thin as a bowstring and sharp with tears. Plant deeper, Tobin. He always plants too shallow when he is upset. Tobin collapsed. Not fainted. Collapsed in the way a man does when hope hits harder than despair. Lila covered her mouth. The archer on the card opened painted eyes. Nadia, Tobin said. That was the first time her name entered my story as more than absence. Nadia Grell looked out from a card no bigger than my palm and somehow made every guard in Ashgrove lower their weapons. The card turned toward me. Farmer, she said, the dead root is stealing your water. Give it a reason to be ashamed. I did not know how to make a root ashamed, so I planted deeper. The twig split my palm and drove itself down. The ground drank the blood, water, and fertilizer all at once. Then Ashgrove Forest inhaled. Every dead lantern lit green. The sacred tree did not regrow from the old trunk. That would have been too clean. The Havenacre twig grew through it. A young trunk burst out of the dead core, pale brown and ordinary for one heartbeat. Then roots shot outward, not like chains, but like hands opening. They wrapped around the seed pods and squeezed. The pods popped. Elves spilled out of flowers, not gracefully. A grown warrior dropped headfirst into the mud and shouted a word I had never heard but understood perfectly. A grandmother tumbled out wrapped in petals and slapped the nearest guard because she landed angry. 2 children coughed sap on Cora's boots. Cora stared down at them, then at her splinter, then at me. Your tree spits citizens, she said. It is new. Valeria stepped back as a branch brushed her shoulder. The branch did not burn. It tapped her crown of dark aura, then moved away like it had decided final bosses were poor fertilizer. Valeria looked offended and slightly impressed. The new tree kept growing. The black threads snapped one by one. Every thread Cora had cut became a clean seam. Every card Lila held glowed. Every elf who fell from a flower landed breathing, furious or confused, which was better than dead. The root speaker tried to crawl toward the old stump. The carnivorous plant tripped him with one vine and stole his shoe. I decided the plant could keep it. Nadia's archer card rose from the mud and hovered between Tobin and Lila. She was not fully back, not in the way Tobin wanted. The tree had given bodies back to those still inside it. Nadia had been used differently, split into the deck when the roots stole every bridge they could find. That was the cost after the miracle. But she was not gone. Tobin, Nadia said. He reached for the card, stopped, and looked at me. I nodded. He took it with 2 fingers like it was worn glass. Nadia smiled from the painted card. You look terrible. Tobin laughed and cried at the same time. You are a card. You became a card master. Marriage changes people. The clown card popped out, wiped one painted tear, and got slapped back into the deck by Lila. Not now, Lila said. The clown obeyed. That was how I knew Lila was going to be terrifying later. The surviving elves gathered around the new tree. For a dangerous second, they looked at me. That was how cults start, so I pointed at Lila. She makes the rules. Lila looked horrified. Me? You already made the first one under pressure. I am not old enough to. The old ones fed people to a tree. The bar is underground. A few elves flinched. Good. Cora stepped beside Lila and lifted the farm splinter. Silverblade will help clear remaining Blackgear roots under her command. The Silverblade fighters looked at their broken saint, then at the splinter. Then they bowed to Cora and Lila both. Cora's jaw tightened, but she did not reject it this time. That was her status returning, not as the woman with the strongest sword, but as the woman who had learned to cut without killing the hostage. Valeria watched all of it with narrowed eyes. You are building an alliance, she said. I am assigning cleanup. You assigned a forest. I delegated. You delegated a race. Only temporarily. Nadia's card turned toward Valeria. The whole clearing went cold. For one beat, grief, queenhood, and old war stood facing each other in the mud. Then Nadia bowed from the card. Queen Valeria! Valeria did not smile. Card spirit. Thank you for not burning my daughter. Was talked out of it. Nadia's painted eyes shifted to me. He does that. Valeria looked annoyed by the accuracy. Lila wiped her face and turned to the gathered elves. No Blackgear in Ashgrove, she said. No blood property, no stolen gifts, no tree bargains without the people inside them awake enough to answer. The young elf she had saved raised one hand. And the deck? Lila held it up. The deck helps by asking. The New World tree rustled. A branch bent down and touched the true deck. For a second, I thought the whole thing was about to steal my gift again. Instead, the branch carved a green mark on the deck case, shaped like an open gate, not ownership. Permission. The forest had joined the rule instead of eating it. The clearing understood it before I did. Ashgrove had returned. Nadia spoke. Lila became the bridge nobody could politely ignore. Cora had a path for Silverblade that did not start with sharper metal. And the forest joined what people were already beginning to call the Havenacre Alliance, despite my repeated objections to anything sounding that organized. Then Valeria gave the reaction that made the road ahead worse. Valeria stood beneath the New World tree, black aura threaded with the same gold that had appeared during the Tai Chi motion. The branches leaned away from her, not in fear exactly, in respect with escape plans. She looked at the elves, the cards, Cora's fighters, Tobin holding Nadia's archer card, Lila giving orders while pretending not to shake, and me with dirt under my nails. "You keep refusing thrones," Valeria said. "Correct. So the world will build something worse around you. That sounds like a threat." "It is an observation." The new tree dropped one apple into my hands. It was small, red, and rude enough to hit my knuckles. Valeria looked at it, then at me. "The world does not need another king," she said. "It needs a farmer. Everyone is afraid to disappoint." I hated how much that sounded like responsibility. I thought planting one tree meant one kingdom was safe. Then the next city tried to build a new Valeria under a hospital. After Ashgrove joined the Havenacre Alliance, people stopped asking whether my farm could help. They started asking what I would do next. I hated that question. The next answer was Iron Ridge, because Ashgrove's warning had teeth. Another city was trying to build a new Valeria under a hospital. Before we chased that nightmare, we needed blades that could cut black gear roots out of living bodies before Valeria solved the problem with fire. Iron Ridge's answer had been legendary ore. I arrived at their forge city with a kitchen knife wrapped in a dish towel. That was not the image of leadership anyone wanted. It was, unfortunately, the tool that had kept slicing through problems before I understood them. The rule was clear before we crossed the Iron Ridge gate. Without better blades, every next rescue turned into Valeria burning corruption out of hostages one body at a time. But if I handed my farm tools to a faction, every faction after that would learn the wrong lesson. They would not ask for help. They would ask for ownership. Valeria walked beside me under a plain travel cloak and looked at the mountain gates like they had personally bored her. "Give me the location of the roots," she said. "I will remove the problem. With fire. With efficiency. Those have become different words since I met you." Cora Vey limped behind us with a farm splinter tucked through her belt like a holy insult. "He is right. If the gear is inside a soldier, fire punishes the soldier first." Valeria gave her a cold glance. "I did not ask the sword student." Cora smiled with one corner of her mouth. "Good. I answered anyway." That was how I knew Cora was healing. Broken experts are polite. Recovering experts become annoying again. Iron Ridge did not look like a city so much as an argument with a mountain. Black chimneys punched out of red stone. Water wheels groaned. Dwarf guards watched us from metal balconies, and every one of them looked at my dish towel before looking at my face. Rumor had beaten us there. That was getting old. A forge herald shouted from the gate, "Ethan Bramwell of Havenacre carries the blade that cut cursed roots in Ashgrove." "I carry a knife," I said. The crowd leaned forward. The dish towel shifted. The kitchen knife inside made a soft sound against the hilt. Every forge hammer in the outer yard stopped mid-swing. Valeria looked delighted. "Your cutlery has intimidated labor. I miss when forks stayed quiet." A dwarf guard led us straight into the central forge yard. No council hall, no map room, no polite waiting chamber where men in hats converted danger into speeches. King Amos had better instincts than that. He stood beside a black anvil under the open sky, short, broad, and still enough that the whole forge yard used him as its center without asking. His beard was bound with iron rings, his hands were bare. Every dwarf around him wore gloves except him. He looked at my towel, then at me. "Show me," King Amos said. A man near the anvil laughed before I could unwrap it. Not a dwarf. Too tall, too polished, too full of himself. He wore a merchant's red coat and carried a glass case with a black plate inside. The crowd around him gave him the sour space people give a bad smell they cannot publicly insult yet. The forge scammer bowed toward King Amos. "Your Majesty, before this farmer dirties the anvil, allow a real supplier to demonstrate a proper relic." Valeria's eyes warmed under her hood. That was not warmth. That was pre-murder. I caught her sleeve. "No. He called you dirt. I have been called worse by chickens." The scammer lifted the black plate from the glass case. "Indestructible demon bone alloy. Certified unbreakable. Able to resist black gear bite, dragon flame, and queen class magic." Marigold, who had been curled behind the forge gate pretending to be a hill with scales, opened one golden eye. The scammer saw the eye and got a little less red in the face. Then he doubled down, because men selling lies hate silence more than truth. He set the fake relic on the anvil and slapped it with a hammer. The hammer bounced. The crowd murmured. The scammer smiled. "See? Iron Ridge needs relics, not kitchen scrap." King Amos did not smile. He looked at the plate, then at the hammer, then at the tiny smear of black residue now crawling along the hammerhead. His jaw tightened. A young forge worker reached to wipe it clean. The residue snapped onto his glove. The glove began crawling up his wrist. The crowd shifted from boredom to fear in one breath. Power now, soul later. The bill had entered the forge yard wearing a sales pitch. Valeria lifted one hand. No fire, I said. The black smear hit the forge worker's sleeve and started biting through the cloth. I unwrapped the kitchen knife. The whole yard recoiled, not because the knife looked impressive. It looked like a kitchen knife, plain handle, shallow nick near the tip from a frozen squash, slight stain near the base that no amount of scrubbing had ever fixed. That made the recoil worse. Experts know when ordinary things are not acting ordinary. I stepped to the forge worker, set the knife flat against the crawling smear, and barely moved my wrist. The black residue split. It did not shriek. It did not smoke dramatically. It just stopped being a thing. The forge worker stumbled backward, alive and very interested in breathing. The scammer's fake relic cracked on the anvil. I had not touched it. The crack ran through the black plate before the kitchen knife fully left the worker's sleeve. One line, clean, embarrassing. The relic fell into two pieces. Inside was cheap metal, painted bone, and a tiny black gear seed trying to hide under wax. The forge yard went quiet. Then the crowd turned on the scammer. Not with weapons first, with faces. That is worse for a public liar. A blade kills once. A crowd realizing you sold them poison kills the outfit, the name, the road behind you, and every future handshake. The scammer backed away. This is sabotage. King Amos finally moved. He picked up one half of the fake relic with tongs, held it out to the crowd, and dropped it into a bucket of pale water. The water turned black. Every dwarf in the yard hissed through their teeth. King Amos looked at the scammer. You brought black gear seed to my forge and called it protection. The scammer looked at me. He planted it. Bad choice. Valeria stepped out of my grip. She did not uncover her face. She did not need to. The forge shadows bent toward her like old subjects remembering taxes. The scammer dropped to his knees so fast his teeth clicked. King Amos looked at Valeria's shadow, then at me, then at the kitchen knife. His expression changed from suspicion to professional horror. Do not set that blade on my anvil, he said. I froze. Why? Because the anvil has served Ironridge for 400 years, and I do not know if your knife respects retirement. Valeria laughed. One dwarf guard crossed himself with a hammer. King Amos stepped closer to the knife, stopped 2 arm lengths away, and did not touch it. That reaction did more than any speech. The king of a forge city, a man who had just lifted cursed metal with tongs like garbage, would not put his bare hand near my dish towel knife. What is it? Cora asked. King Amos did not take his eyes off the blade. Not metal, not only metal. Then what? A rule! Atlas rattled from the basket under my arm, because the sacred sword had insisted on coming and hated being ignored. I am also a rule. King Amos slowly looked at the basket. I tightened the cloth over Atlas. No, I told the basket. The king blinked once. Did the basket complain? Not encourage it. The scammer tried to crawl away during the distraction. Marigold lowered one claw in front of him. He stopped. The young forge worker whose sleeve I had cut free dropped to one knee in front of King Amos. Your Majesty! The stain stopped. It did not retreat. It ended. King Amos nodded, grim. Death rule. The forge yard murmured. That phrase spread faster than smoke. Death rule. I did not like it. Valeria did. Useful, she said. No, I said. Everyone looked at me. That was how I learned. Telling a demon queen no in a dwarf forge carries acoustics. I held the knife up by the handle. This goes back to my kitchen. Dozen dwarf faces fell. The scammer, still trapped under Marigold's claw shadow, actually looked relieved. I pointed the knife toward the cracked fake relic. You can study what it ended. You can make tools that help cut people free. But nobody owns this knife. Nobody borrows it without me there. Nobody sells a copy. Nobody puts a crown, seal, contract, or guild stamp on it. King Amos stared at me. Valeria's smile thinned. Cora whispered, Good. I kept going before courage expired. I am not building an armory for anyone who thinks hostages are acceptable material. The forge yard changed, not softly. Dwarves understand ownership. They understand tools. They understand lines you do not cross because crossing them turns craft into theft. King Amos turned toward the forge crowd. Ironridge will make gear shears under Havenacre rules. We cut corruption from living bodies. We do not seize the farmer's tool. We do not claim the farmer's farm. We do not sell death as protection. The forge yard struck hammer to stone once. The sound rolled through the city. That was Ironridge joining the Havenacre alliance. No treaty, no feast, no signatures. Just a king publicly refusing to own the knife everyone suddenly wanted. Then a forge apprentice tried to be helpful and ruined the dignity of the moment. He stepped forward with both palms open. If the knife is a rule, maybe it chooses worthy hands. The dish towel snapped around the handle by itself, not gently. It slapped his fingers and tied itself into a knot. The apprentice stumbled back while 3 older dwarves laughed so hard one of them dropped a hammer on his own boot. King Amos did not laugh. He looked at the knot, then at me. Even the cloth enforces ownership. The cloth has been around Valeria too long, I said. Valeria looked pleased. Good cloth. That tiny public embarrassment did useful work. It told Ironridge what my speech could not. The tool rules were not manners. They were active. The scammer made one last mistake. He lifted his head and spat. You will all kneel to Arclight when Dr. Quaid pays triple. The name hit the yard wrong. King Amos looked at him sharply. Valeria's shadow stopped moving. I did not know Dr. Quaid yet. I only knew every serious person in Ironridge reacted as if the scammer had opened a cellar door and let a bad smell out. The scammer realized it too late. He clamped his mouth shut. Marigold's claw tapped the stone beside his head. The stone cracked. The scammer began sharing, loudly, not a confession speech, a panic spill. Arclight pays for relic shells, hospital cargo, sealed crates, no questions. I never saw inside. King Amos turned to a dwarf guard. The rail yard. The guard ran. So did we. No travel montage, no forge tour, no heroic send-off. We reached the rail yard as a black train screamed out from behind the mountain, dragging 6 sealed medical cars toward Arclight Dominion. The side of each car bore a plain hospital cross stamped over fresh black wax. Valeria looked at the wax. Her face went still. Those marks are not healing marks, she said. King Amos shoved a set of newly forged shears into the hands of 3 dwarf riders. They were rough, still hot, and ugly as fence tools. Perfect. The route passes through Gear Country, he said. If Arclight is buying black ear shells through Ironridge, my city rides. I wanted to say something responsible. The train whistle screamed again. So I climbed aboard with the kitchen knife wrapped back in the dish towel and immediately regretted every decision that had involved leaving my porch. The train did not make it halfway to the valley. Chains snapped across the track. The engine shrieked. The first medical car lifted off the rails and slammed back down hard enough to throw me into Valeria's side. She caught me by the collar with one hand. Careful, she said. I was attacked by transportation. Masked raiders dropped from the cliffs. They did not rush the passengers. They did not loot the tool crates. They went straight for the sealed hospital cars. That was the first sign they were not normal bandits. The second was their leader. She hit the roof of our car, rolled under a blast from a dwarf rifle, and cut the wax seal off the nearest medical crate without breaking the glass inside. Precise. Angry, not greedy. Valeria stepped through the door and raised one hand. I grabbed her wrist. Again. One day that habit was going to remove my arm. No killing until we know what they want. They attacked our train. They attacked the crates. The raider leader heard us. She turned, mask cracked across one cheek, eyes sharp over the cloth. Then you are smarter than the dwarf king's guards, she shouted. King Amos, hanging half out of the next car with a hammer in hand, barked, I heard that. Good, the raider leader shouted back. Stop defending the cargo. Sealed crate behind her pulsed. The wax marks split open. A black thread shot out wrapped around one dwarf rider's wrist and began crawling under his skin. He screamed. King Amos threw one of the rough gear shears. Cora caught it, stepped into the Tai Chi motion, and cut the black thread off the rider without touching the wrist. The rider collapsed alive. King Amos stared at the ugly shears like a father watching an embarrassing child graduate. The raider leader saw the cut and changed plans. Fast! She stopped fighting us and pointed at the crates. All of them. Open all of them now or everyone on this train becomes fuel. Valeria's eyes went black at the word fuel. I stepped to the nearest crate and lifted the farm knife. The raider leader flinched. Not the glass. I'm cutting the seal. You do not know what is inside. No one around me ever lets that stop them. The knife touched the wax seal. The seal ended. The crate opened by itself. Inside was not medicine. It was a glass tube full of black water, gold dust, and a curved shard that looked like a piece of a crown made from living shadow. Valeria stopped breathing. A second crate cracked open under Marigold's claw. Inside was a lock of dark hair suspended in fluid, wrapped in tiny metal teeth. A third crate split when the raider leader kicked it. Inside was a strip of black scale that pulsed when Valeria stepped closer. Every fragment turned toward her, not like metal to a magnet, like hungry mouths to a name. The raider leader pulled off her mask. The guards in the rear car saw her face and dropped their weapons. King Amos swore under his breath. The woman looked at me first, not Valeria. That was either courage or the most aggressive misreading of authority I had seen all week. My name is Rhea Arclight, she said, and that cargo is not weapons. Valeria's aura rolled off her shoulders. Rhea did not step back. She pointed at the open crates, at the living fragments turning toward the demon queen under a hospital seal. It is pieces of her! Rhea Arclight did not take us to a throne room. She took us under a hospital. That told me enough about Arclight Dominion before anyone gave a speech. Palaces hide pride. Hospitals hide sins with clean floors and soft voices. The first soldier at the basement gate saw Valeria's face and raised his spear with shaking hands. "The dead tyrant," he whispered. Then he looked at the crate behind her, the one holding her hair in black water, and bowed to it by reflex. Valeria smiled, the spear in his hands, bent without her touching it. Rhea stepped between them. He was taught the lie, do not kill the symptom. Valeria's eyes stayed on the soldier. Move before I educate him. I lifted the dish towel-wrapped knife. We came for the cargo. The soldier stared at me like a farmer where the towel was the least sensible part of his night. Then his chest clicked. A black gear under his armor opened like an eye. He screamed, dropped the spear, and clawed at his ribs. Rhea caught him before he hit the floor. "This is why I attacked the train!" The gear pulsed. A second pulse answered from deeper under the hospital. Then hundreds answered back. The rule became clear in a way no diagram could improve. If the machine below finished waking, it would build a false Valeria out of stolen fragments and stolen people. If Valeria destroyed it the way she wanted, every soldier bound to those gears would die with it. Valeria heard the gears answering. Her shadow filled the hallway. "Where is the one using my pieces?" she asked. A calm voice spoke from the far end of the hall. "Queen Valeria Thorn, you remain historically inconvenient." Dr. Quaid stepped out under the hospital lamps. He wore a white coat without a stain on it. That alone made me dislike him. Anyone doing honest work under a hospital during a crisis has stains somewhere. Behind him, 2 rows of gear-bound soldiers raised rifles with hands that trembled against their own orders. Dr. Quaid looked at Rhea. The runaway heir returns with raiders, dwarves, a farmer, and the original template. There it was. Heir! The soldiers behind Rhea shifted. Some looked at her like they had been waiting years to be allowed to recognize her. Rhea did not claim the moment with a speech. She grabbed the closest dying soldier by his armor and pulled him upright. "Breathe," she told him. That did more for her authority than any crown would have. Dr. Quaid smiled at the movement. "Compassion is inefficient when the body has already accepted improvement." The gear in the soldier's chest bit deeper. He screamed again. Valeria stepped forward. I grabbed her sleeve. She did not look at me. "Farmer, no mass destruction." He called me a template. I heard. "He's beneath the hospital using my bones." I heard that too. "And you are touching my sleeve, because if I touch his, you will get there first." That made Rhea cough once, which might have been a laugh if the hallway were not full of hostages with guns. Dr. Quaid's eyes moved to me. Then to the knife towel, then to the food basket I still had strapped across my chest because apparently my survival instinct had become meal prep. "Agricultural anomaly," he said. "I prefer farmer. I prefer useful." Valeria's shadow hit the wall behind him. Dr. Quaid did not flinch. That bothered me until the gear-bound soldiers all flinched for him. His courage was borrowed from hostages. The rifles rose. Rhea shouted, "Do not fire!" Some soldiers listened. The gears did not. Black teeth locked around their wrists and pulled triggers. Cora moved first. She stepped into the Tai Chi motion, ugly iron-ridged shears in one hand, farm splinter in the other. The bullets turned sideways in the air and buried themselves in the walls. King Amos, who had followed us down with 3 dwarf riders and absolutely no patience, stared at her. Those shears were not designed for dancing. Cora cut a gear cable off one soldier's wrist. "They are learning." The soldier fell, alive. Rhea shoved him behind her line. "Carry him out." 2 rebels moved. Dr. Quaid lifted one finger. A gear tooth opened on the soldier's throat. The soldier stopped breathing. Rhea froze. Dr. Quaid looked at us with his clean, dead smile. "Every body in this facility is connected. Cut blindly and you prove my point for me." Valeria's aura sharpened so hard the tile floor cracked. He had built the perfect coward's fortress, a villain standing behind the pain of people he had already wounded. So we went deeper. Not because he invited us, because Rhea kicked the emergency doors open, Cora cut the trigger cables, and Valeria walked through the rifle line like hatred with legs. I followed with the basket and tried not to think about how often my life had become walk after final boss into basement. The soul reactor sat under the hospital chapel. No stained glass, no candles. Just a white circular chamber with beds around the walls and black tubes running from every bed into a glass cradle at the center. Soldiers lay in the beds. Some were old, some were young. Some had missing limbs replaced with black gear frames. Every gear ticked in time with the crates from the train, and inside the cradle floated a woman-shaped body with Valeria's hair, Valeria's crown line, and none of Valeria's weight. That was the worst part. The false queen looked almost right until you stood beside the real one, then she looked empty in a way skin should not. Valeria did not speak. The chamber lights dimmed. Dr. Quaid walked to the opposite side of the cradle and placed one hand on the glass. Arc-light Dominion survived because I refused superstition. The queen conquered the world once. A controlled queen can defend it forever. Ria's voice cut across the chamber. You fed our wounded to it, preserved them. A soldier on one bed turned his head. Half his face was metal. His one human eye found Ria. Princess, he whispered. There was the word. Not from a herald, not from a document, from a dying soldier under a hospital who still knew who had come back for him. Ria's face hardened. She did not correct him. The rebels behind her heard it and straightened. Dr. Quaid frowned. That was the first honest emotion I saw from him. He turned to the cradle. Begin ascent. The black tubes pulsed. Every soldier on every bed arched in pain. Valeria vanished. 1 second she stood beside me. The next, her hand was around Dr. Quaid's throat. He smiled through the pressure and lifted a dead man's switch. Every soldier's gear opened at once. Kill me, he choked, and the queen wakes hungry. Valeria's fingers tightened. I stepped to the cradle. That was stupid. It was also the only place nobody expected me to go. The false queen's eyes opened. They were black. Not Valeria black, not Storm black. Empty black, like a cellar with no floor. The stolen fragments in the train crates began melting into her. Hair, scale, crown shard, old bone. The black tubes fed her with the breath of soldiers who had already paid too much for one man's ambition. She looked at Valeria. Then at me. Source? She whispered. Dr. Quaid's smile widened. Yes, recognize the anomaly. I did not like being recognized by basement projects, so I opened the food basket. Valeria's head snapped toward me. No, she said. Dr. Quaid blinked. Ria stared. What are you doing? Feeding the problem. Valeria's voice went dangerously soft. That food is mine. Is 1 jar of stew. It was packed for me. The thing wearing your face does not get a full bowl. That did not soothe her. It did make her look less likely to crush my spine before the reactor finished killing everyone. I pulled out a small covered jar of pepper stew, the same kind that had made Valeria sweat, claim my couch, and pretend research was a normal housing arrangement. The false queen watched the jar. Her throat moved. Appetite without a person behind it. That sight made Valeria's expression turn cold in a new way. Dr. Quaid laughed. You think farm soup can interfere with structured resurrection? No, I said. I think everyone keeps underestimating leftovers. I dipped a spoon and held it to the false queen's mouth. The chamber leaned toward the moment. Dr. Quaid did not stop me. That was his mistake. Smart people can be too smart to fear soup. The false queen swallowed. The reaction was immediate. Gold light cracked under her skin. She screamed with too many voices. Not one voice copied from Valeria. Hundreds, soldiers, patients, old battlefield echoes, fragments stolen from graves, wounds, and gear-bound bodies. The soup did not evolve her. It rejected the theft. The false queen's body bowed backward. Black water poured from her mouth, then turned clear mid-air and fell as rain over the beds. Every soldier inhaled at once. The gears in their chests loosened by one tooth. Dr. Quaid finally panicked. No. That was a beautiful word when it came from him. A black tube snapped toward the stew jar, as if the reactor had realized the smallest thing in the room was ruining the biggest lie. I grabbed the jar. The tube wrapped my wrist. Valeria cut it with one fingernail before the kitchen knife left my belt. She did not burn the soldier connected to it. She cut only the hunger reaching through him. The soldier on that bed stopped screaming. Valeria looked annoyed by her own precision. Do not make me practiced at mercy, she said. Too late, I said. Valeria released his throat and stepped to the cradle. The false queen looked at her with empty eyes splitting into human colors, one stolen soul at a time. Valeria reached through the glass. It melted around her wrist. I thought she was going to destroy the body. Instead, she pressed 2 fingers to its forehead. You are not me, Valeria said. The false queen shuddered. I know, it whispered, and the voice finally sounded relieved. The body cracked into streams of clear water and black teeth. Ria moved fast. Beds first, she shouted. The rebels obeyed, not because she had royal blood, because she pointed at living people before pointing at the throne-shaped horror in the middle of the room. That was how Ria Arclight began ruling again. By making rescue the first order anyone heard. Cora cut cable after cable with the iron ridge shears, each motion slow enough not to tear the soldiers apart. King Amos shoved gear frames open with tongs. The dwarf riders caught collapsing bodies. Marigold broke through the chapel floor from above because subtlety had abandoned us hours ago and pinned 3 gear columns under one claw. Valeria walked bed to bed. She did not burn, she removed. One black gear opened under her hand, tried to bite, then froze as her aura wrapped around the soldier instead of the gear. She pulled the gear out like a thorn from skin. The soldier screamed, then breathed. Another gear tried to crawl into a child patient near the side wall. Rhea threw herself between it and the bed. The gear bit her armored sleeve. I cut it with the kitchen knife before Valeria could turn the whole corner of the room into punishment. The gear ended. Rhea stared at the cut, then at me. Your knife is horrible. I miss when it was for onions. Dr. Quaid ran for the central controls. Controls were all he had left. Villains who lose bodies reach for levers, like levers are morality. He slammed his palm onto the black panel. Nothing happened. The false queen was gone. The stolen souls were separating. The reactor had no hunger left except the one he built into it. The glass cradle opened behind him. Dr. Quaid looked back. His face showed the room was not his fortress anymore. It was an empty mouth. Black tubes snapped around his wrists. He screamed as the reactor pulled him backward into the cradle he had made for a controlled queen. Rhea lifted her sword. I caught her wrist. She glared at me. He used them. Yes, he will answer. He is answering. Dr. Quaid slammed against the glass from inside. The reactor lit around him, but there were no stolen souls left to feed it. No queen body. No obedient army. No clean lie. Just him and his empty machine. The glass sealed. His voice became a muffled insect buzz. Valeria looked at the cradle. I can break it. Rhea's grip trembled under my hand. Then she looked at the soldiers being carried out, the patients waking, the rebels lowering rifles because there were no enemies left inside the beds. Leave him where every survivor can see what the machine costs, Rhea said. That was not mercy. It was better than mercy. It was public consequence. Dr. Quaid beat one fist against the glass. Nobody moved to help him. The gear-bound soldiers left the beds alive. Some could stand. Some had to be carried. Some cursed Rhea because pain needs a target before it finds the right one. She took it. She stood in the broken chapel basement with blood on her sleeves and ordered the hospital open from bottom to roof. No locked wards, she said. No hidden beds, no gear under skin without consent. Feed patients first. Arrest my guards last if they are carrying people. A rebel captain stared at her. Princess, the palace can wait behind the burn ward. The soldiers heard that. The hospital heard it. A palace guard at the stairwell tried to recover the old order anyway. He raised his rifle toward Rhea and shouted that the royal line had no authority in a medical emergency. A gear-scarred soldier, still unable to stand without help, threw his own body against the rifle barrel. The shot went into the ceiling. Dust rained over the beds. Rhea caught the soldier before he fell. The guard looked at the patients behind her, at Dr. Quaid trapped in glass, then at Valeria standing perfectly still beside the empty cradle. His hand opened. The rifle hit the floor. Nobody applauded. Good. Applause would have made it smaller. They simply started carrying people out faster. Arclight Dominion heard it before nightfall. Not through a proclamation, through doors opening and people coming out alive. That was what Arclight saw. Valeria had not destroyed the false queen. She had refused to let a fake version of herself decide what counted as a person. Rhea had not seized authority by blood. She had taken it by rescue. Dr. Quaid had not been sent to a clean trial where men like him practiced speeches. He was trapped inside the empty reactor he built, tapping on glass while survivors walked past him. For a few breaths, I believed the worst thing under the hospital had ended. Then the floor drain beside the shattered cradle burped. A drop of black water crawled out against gravity. It had no body, no face, just a tiny dark bead carrying more cold than the whole basement. Valeria turned. Marigold snarled. The bead slipped between two cracks in the tile before anyone reached it. The beginner system flashed across my vision. Unknown dark water fragment detected. Destination, Havenacre Farm. I closed the panel too late. The pantry alarm was already screaming in my head. The dark water fragment reached Havenacre before we did. It expected a battlefield. The first thing it triggered was Valeria's pantry alarm. That alarm was not heroic. It was 3 copper pans banging themselves against the wall, 2 jam jars rolling to block the door, and Bolt howling from the porch like someone had insulted his mother and stolen his oil. I heard it in my head while Arclight's hospital still smoked behind us. Valeria heard it too. Her face went blank. My pantry shelf, she said. Our pantry shelf. She turned toward me slowly. That was bad timing for the pudding bowl hidden in my pack. After Arclight, I had wrapped it in a towel from the hospital kitchen and convinced myself the little hot spring behind the smokehouse was private enough for one stupid question. I was going to ask whether research conditions had become home. Valeria's eyes dropped to the bundle under my arm. Is that dessert? She asked. Later, I said. Then Darkwater attacked my house. That was the story of my life by then. Every time I tried to be normal, an ancient horror took it personally. Marigold flew us back faster than weather. Rhea Arclight's riders followed along the rail. King Amos sent dwarf wagons full of rough iron-ridged shears. Cora Vey rode with one hand on Mabel and the Tai Chi pamphlet tucked into her armor. Lila and Tobin Grell sent cardbirds ahead until the sky looked like a panicked paper migration. None of that made me feel prepared. The rule was simple and awful. If Darkwater corrupted Havenacre, every gift I had ever made could turn into a weapon pointed back at the people I gave it to. If I destroyed the farm to stop that, I would lose the quiet life I had refused a prophecy to protect. Valeria's solution was ready before we landed. "Burn the infected acres," she said. "No, you have not seen them yet. They are my acres. They may already be its teeth. Then we pull the teeth." She looked at me like I had suggested dentistry for a thunderstorm. Marigold dropped us at the north field. Havenacre was still standing. That was the first mercy. It was also the trap. The farmhouse windows glowed black. The monster guards at the fence were frozen in place, heads lowered, dark water leaking from their eyes. The chicken coop had turned around to face the road by itself, which felt rude even during an invasion. The pantry door was open. Inside, jam jars shook on the shelves. Pepper bundles twisted like hanging snakes. Valeria's blue mug floated in the air with black water crawling around the rim. Valeria stepped forward. The mug cracked. The air changed. A voice came from the sink, the well, the rain barrel, and every wet footprint in the yard at once. Queen Fragment returned. Source located. Gifts indexed. Bolt barked and fired his chest hatch. The white beam hit the black water pouring out of the well. The water swallowed it. Bolt staggered. That scared me more than the voice. Then the voice corrected itself. "Name, Azrin." Valeria's eyes narrowed. Darkwater learned manners. Azrin spoke through the rain barrel. "Manners are handles. All gifts have handles." The true deck screamed from Lila's cardbird before she even reached the gate. The paper bird burst over the porch and spilled cards across the mud. The shield card flashed, then grew teeth along its edges. The beast card bent backward. The clown card came out wrong, half smiling, half drowned. Lila arrived behind it, breathless, Tobin at her side with Nadia Grell's archer card glowing in his hand. Lila saw the corrupted cards and reached for them. I shouted, "Ask first!" She froze. Darkwater roots snapped out of the mud toward her wrists. Tobin moved between them and raised the shield card with both hands. "May we defend?" If the shield slammed down, the teeth on its edge turned outward. That one word changed the gift. It did not bite Lila, it bit the root. The root screamed black water into the grass. Nadia's archer card lit up, her painted bow pulled back by itself. "Targets?" Lila asked. "Darkwater only," I said. Nadia fired. The arrow pinned the black stream to the fence post without touching the monster guard trapped beside it. That was the first win of the final attack. The deck did not become safe because we understood it. It became safe because Lila remembered the rule under pressure. Azrin shifted through the well. "Rule recorded." "That sounded bad," Tobin said. "It usually is," I said. The shelter wagon crashed through the road behind the Grells. Nell Quill jumped down with Ravel on her shoulder and 3 terrified children behind sacks of bread. "I told them to stay in Stonebridge," Nell said. One child raised a hand. Ravel said no. Ravel pointed its wooden spoon at the farmhouse like a tiny commander. The pantry floor split. A black mouth opened under the children. Ravel leaped. It hit the floor first, spoon down, stitched shield mark blazing silver. The mouth bit the spoon and stopped. Ravel shook. Nell grabbed the doll's back seam. "No, you do not hold it alone." She pressed both hands to Ravel's shield mark. The cursed thread that had once made the dolls frightening flared, but the farm thread held it in shape. It became a round silver shield over the children, the wagon, and the pantry door. Valeria glanced at the doll. "Cloth with teeth is useful." Ravel saluted without lowering the spoon. Azrin poured more black water through the cracks. Doll, card, blade, root, dragon, dog, queen, all indexed. Atlas shot out of the umbrella bucket and landed hilt first in my hand. "Final strike authorized," the sword said. "At last." The beginner system flashed beside it. "Hero route restored. Execute final strike." I looked at the black water crawling over my porch, the children behind Ravel, the monster guards trapped in their own bodies, and Valeria standing between my house and a voice that wanted to catalog her like cargo. Then I stabbed Atlas into the ground beside the fence. The sword made a sound that should have cracked history. "I am not a post. You are today." The fence lit blue around the blade. Azrin slammed into the line and bounced. The old prophecy sword finally did something useful by being demoted. Atlas went silent for one glorious second. Then Mabel landed beside it. Cora swung the recovered axe with both hands, not as a battlefield weapon, but as a woodcutting tool following Tai Chi breath. "Raise, turn, settle, chop." She cut the black root wrapped around Atlas without touching the fence. Mabel hummed, smug as ever. Atlas said, "Do not enjoy this." Mabel's blade angled toward it. Shiny post. Even with the farm half drowning, I almost laughed. Then the well exploded. A column of dark water rose above Havenacre, thick with faces I did not know and voices I hoped were not still alive. It reached for the road, the fields, the pantry, the deck, the doll, the knife in my coat, the world tree mark on Lila's deck, every gift that had left my hands and come back with someone else's courage wrapped around it. King Amos arrived at exactly the wrong and right time. His wagon hit a rut, bounced, and dumped a crate of Iron Ridge shears across my yard. Dwarf riders cursed. One shear skidded under a dark root and cut it by accident. The root ended. King Amos saw that and shouted, "Good! The ugly ones work!" He threw a pair to Rhea. Rhea caught them and cut a dark water cable off one of her own soldiers before it reached his throat. The soldier dropped, alive, and immediately rolled to shield a monster guard instead of stabbing it. Rhea saw the choice and shouted, "That is the line. Save first, strike second." Her soldiers obeyed. Arclight finally looked useful without machinery. King Amos reached for the towel in my belt. I slapped his hand. He blinked. I pulled the kitchen knife myself. "No borrowing," he grinned. "Good, still yours." A dark water root punched through the porch and wrapped around Bolt's front leg. Bolt tried to fire. The root swallowed the first pulse and crawled up his metal chest. I ran toward him. Valeria caught the back of my coat. "It wants you close. It has my dog. That is why it wants you close." "I know. When anyway?" Valeria cursed in a language the chickens understood badly enough to panic. I slid under Bolt's chest, cut the root off his leg with the kitchen knife, and the root simply stopped being connected to anything. Bolt's eyes flickered. His tail clicked once. "Porch protocol," I said. Bolt staggered up. The farmhouse answered. The windmill spun backward. The laundry line snapped into a web. The smokehouse chimney split open. The rain barrel, currently occupied by a hostile ancient voice, shot 20 feet into the air and dumped black water across the field. The field drank it, then spat it back. Not as water, as seeds. Tiny black seeds rained across the mud. Every one of them grew a little mouth. Azrin laughed through all of them. "Source corrupted!" Valeria stepped forward. Her aura unfolded with more force than she had shown since the farm attack that started all of this. The ground turned glass under her boots. The sky over Havenacre went black at the edges. Every ally stopped moving because the final boss had stopped pretending to be a houseguest. Azrin rose to meet her as a tower of black water with a heart shape beating inside it. "Queen," it said, "you were built for conquest." Valeria's smile was beautiful and mean. "I was built by myself." She struck. Dark water split. For one breath, I thought she had ended it. Then every monster guard screamed. Every child behind Ravel cried out. Every gear-scarred soldier Rhea had brought fell to one knee. Azrin had tied its heart to anything it touched. Valeria froze before the second strike. That was the growth nobody would have believed on the day she landed in my squash patch. The Demon Queen saw a kill she wanted and stopped because the people inside the consequence were not disposable. Azrin noticed. "Attachment indexed!" Valeria's eyes burned. I hated that voice for using the right word before either of us had handled it properly. The World Tree answered next. A green root burst through the road from nowhere, then another, then a dozen. Ashgrove's new tree had sent itself through Lila's permission mark, not to own Havenacre, but to hold the living things Azrin had tagged. Nadia's archer card lifted in Topin's hand. "Ethan," Nadia said, "your farm is trying to remember what every gift was for." That line gave me the missing answer. Not an explanation. A job. I reached into my coat and found the apple from Ashgrove. The one the new world tree had dropped into my hands like a rude little prophecy. It was bruised from travel. I broke it open. Inside was one seed, red gold and warm. The beginner system flashed again. "Final strike available. Hero route completion guaranteed." I closed it. A second panel appeared. "Alternative action unavailable." I dug a hole in the mud with my bare hands. Azrin saw me, and every black seed mouth turned toward the hole. "Source attempts cultivation. Farmer attempts planting," I corrected. The mouths lunged. Lila played shield. Ravel held spoon. Cora and Mabel chopped. King Amos's shears cut. Rhea's soldiers dragged the trapped bodies behind the world tree roots. Marigold landed on Azrin's water spine and pinned it to the field with both front claws. Bolt opened his chest hatch. This time, he did not fire. He inhaled. The black water around the porch pulled toward him, not into his core, but into the laundry line web, the smokehouse chimney, the fence posts, Atlas in the ground, and every old ridiculous farm trap he had ever installed without telling me. "Good boy," I said. Bolt wagged his tail with poor timing and knocked over a pumpkin. The pumpkin rolled into a dark water mouth and exploded into orange vines. The vines grabbed 3 black seeds and stuffed them into the compost. The compost burped smoke. Even Azrin paused. Valeria looked at me through the chaos. Plant it! There was no queen voice in that line, no command. Trust, which was somehow scarier. I planted the seed. For 1 second, nothing happened. I hated that second. Then Havenacre recognized its own gifts. The true deck flashed green and gold. Ravel's shield mark rang like a bell. Atlas stopped complaining and rooted deeper. Mabel's handle warmed. The kitchen knife hummed in my hand. The world tree roots opened. Iron ridge shears lit along their ugly edges. Ria's gear-scarred soldiers stood without pain. Marigold's scales caught fire without burning. Bolt's chest hatch glowed white. Valeria's aura bent over the seed like a storm, deciding to water a garden instead of flattening it. The seeds sprouted. 1 sapling became 10. 10 became a ring. A living orchard burst out across the torn line of the old Havenacre barrier. Not a wall, a set of rules with leaves. Card gifts could bind but not own. Doll shields could protect but not replace. Blades could cut corruption but not claim bodies. Roots could hold life but not drink it. Dragons could pin monsters without crushing hostages. Dogs could guard without eating spells that were not theirs. Queens could destroy only after the living had somewhere safe to stand. I did not know all of that as a theory. I saw it happen. The orchard caught every dark water handle and changed its grip. Azrin screamed! The black water tower collapsed inward, dragged by its own stolen links into the red gold branches. Faces pulled free from the water and became breath. Gear teeth turned into dead seeds and fell harmless into the mud. Valeria walked into the orchard ring. Azrin's heart hung there, black and beating, pinned by Marigold's claw shadow, Bolt's trap web, Nadia's arrow, Ravel's spoon, Atlas's fence line, Mabel's cut, the knife's edge, and the roots of a tree that had no interest in being a throne. The heart whispered, "Queen, conquer." Valeria looked at me. The whole yard saw it. So did Rhea, Cora, Lila, Topin, Nell, King Amos, Marigold, the soldiers, the children, and every monster guard still trying to decide whether it had become livestock. I stepped beside her. The romantic plan was gone. No hot spring, no pudding, no private sentence, just mud, black water, a ring of impossible trees, and everyone watching. So I asked the truth badly. "Stay," I said. Valeria's eyes did not leave mine. "As research?" she asked. "As protection? Oh, as queen." Her smile started small, hopeful, though I would have denied noticing that at the time. "As what, farmer?" Swallowed. "My home is quieter when you are not invading it," I said. "But it is less alive when you are gone," Cora muttered. "That was terrible," Nadia's card whispered. "Let him finish." "Did not improve much. I want you here," I said. "Not because the world needs you, because I do." Valeria turned from me to the Darkwater heart. Azrin pulsed, trying one last time to make the moment into a throne. "Attachment is leverage," it whispered. Valeria reached out. This time, the orchard held every living thread away from the heart. No hostages, no trapped soldiers, no corrupted gifts, no pantry shelf in danger. Valeria closed her hand. The Darkwater heart shattered. Not with a scream, with a wet little crack, like a rotten fruit finally admitting what it was. Azrin ended in my east field. The orchard dropped red gold petals over everyone. For one breath, Havenacre was silent. Then the chickens attacked the petals. Normal life returns with poor dignity. Valeria looked at the chickens, then at me. Then she laughed, not the old laugh that made rooms kneel. A real laugh, annoyed, victorious, hungry, and mine to hear without a battlefield between us. She turned to everyone gathered at my ruined porch. "This farm is under my protection," Valeria said. Half the crowd started to kneel. She pointed at them. "Do not kneel, it irritates him." They froze halfway down, which looked much stupider. Valeria stepped closer to me and took my hand in front of all of them. "I did not fall for a sword," she said. "I did not fall for a throne. I fell for the strength that fed enemies, repaired curses, spared fools, denied me pantry access, and still told me no when I was wrong." My ears went hot. Valeria's smile sharpened. "Ethan Bramwell is my partner," she said. "Havenacre is my home. If you need peace, ask at the gate. If you come to steal, ask the orchard how that went for Darkwater." That closed the title better than any prophecy could have. The final boss had not become tame. Thank heaven for that. She had chosen. The Havenacre barrier never returned the old way. It did not need to. The peace orchard grew along the roads, not to keep everyone out, but to make everyone enter correctly. Tobin and Lila's cards opened safe paths. Nell and Ravel inspected shelter wagons. Cora trained Silverblade fighters to cut without proving anything. King Amos sent ugly tools with beautiful rules. Rhea's soldiers brought patience before prisoners. Marigold slept on the hill and pretended not to enjoy being called Roof Dragon by children. Bolt updated the safe list and rejected 3 officials for smelling like ownership. We put a sign on the gate. app OIM ments only. Valeria added a second line in sharper handwriting. Pantry rights are not negotiable. I crossed out, not. She crossed out my crossing. That was government now, apparently. The beginner system appeared one last time while I fixed the porch. Hero route incomplete. World threat neutralized by unauthorized agricultural pathway. New catalog available. Peace orchard seeds. I stared at the panel, then at Valeria, who was sitting on the porch couch with the blue mug repaired in one hand and my last pudding bowl in the other. She looked at the panel. Is it offering you violence again? I said. I clicked the seed catalog. For once, the system had learned the right language.